Good morning, distinguished members of the press, colleagues, and friends. It is my honor this morning to welcome you to an important forum, a conversation with the judiciary. Let me also welcome the Honorable Chief Justice, Mr. Justice Brian Sykes, the President of the Court of Appeal, Mrs. Justice Marva MacDonald Bishop, who is online and will be making her presentation online this morning, but is also available to field your questions. Judges of the Court of Appeal who are also joining us online this morning, and judges of the Supreme Court who are also online. Chief Judge of the Parish Court, His Honor Mr. Broderick Smith, who is on stage. He's acting Chief Judge of the Parish Courts. Senior judges of the parish courts who are here in person and online. Mrs. Tricia Cameron Anglin, she's at the end to my left. She is the Director CEO of the Court Administration Division. We have also with us this morning Justice Sector Partners, Directors of the Court Administration Division, other members of staff who are online and in person. We thank you very much for joining us this morning for what is a very important forum this morning. Today's gathering reflects our shared commitment to transparency, accountability, and of course, to dialogue. The judiciary is not only the guardians of justice, but also a vital institution that serves the people, and this forum is designed to strengthen that relationship. This morning, the leadership of the judiciary will present on the work of the courts, highlighting achievements, challenges, and the ongoing reforms. Following these presentations this morning, we will open the floor for questions from the media. This exchange is essential because justice is not only done in the courtroom, it must be understood, communicated, and trusted by the wider society. We believe that conversations like these build bridges between the judiciary and the public. They foster confidence in the rule of law and remind us that justice is a shared responsibility, one that requires openness, respect, and collaboration. So I invite you, members of the press, to engage fully this morning. Ask your questions and help us to deepen the public's understanding of the judiciary's role in safeguarding rights, freedoms, and the integrity of our democracy. We thank you for being here this morning and for finding it convenient. And let us begin this conversation in a spirit of partnership and one of purpose. Our first speaker this morning will be the Honorable Chief Justice Brian Sykes. And at the end of all the presentations this morning, as I indicated earlier, we will field your questions. Bear in mind, we are unable to respond to questions in relation to matters which are before the court. However, where it relates to the administration of justice, we are ready, willing, and open to responding to those questions this morning. Chief Justice, I invite you to the lectern for your presentation, sir. While the Chief Justice settles himself, please turn your attention to the screens.
Justice is not static. It does not stand still. It evolves with society, with technology, and with the needs of the people it serves. Over the past year, the Judiciary of Jamaica has confronted challenges, embraced reform, and deepened its commitment to delivering timely and effective justice. We have measured our performance not by perception, but by data. We have examined what works. We have acknowledged what does not. And we have made decisions grounded in evidence and accountability. From strengthening case management in the Supreme Court to expanding digitization efforts with international partners to advancing preparations for the integrated electronic court management system to restoring court operations following Hurricane Melissa, the work has been deliberate, the progress measurable, the vision clear. This year, Jamaica will host the Commonwealth Magistrates and Judges Association Conference in Kingston, welcoming jurists from across the Commonwealth to share ideas, innovations, and commitment to judicial excellence. As members of the International Consortium for Court Excellence and the Judicial Dispute Resolution Network, members of the Standing International Forum of Commercial Courts, we continue to align our standards with global best practices. Today, we share not only achievements, but the realities, the reforms, and the road ahead.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming. And let me begin by congratulating the Court Administration Division for organizing this important forum. As you know, we began our journey in a deliberate way to court excellence with the launch of our first ever strategic plan in 2019. We are now in the second strategic plan, 2024 to 2028, and that was influenced in part by the International Consortium for Court Excellence, which in turn developed the International Framework for Court Excellence, which was designed to create a practical guide speaking to values, performance areas for court excellence, and utilizing concepts and tools that tribunals and courts implement to improve service delivery. Out of that has come something known as global measures, and that is what we use to measure the performance of courts. Now, the measurement of the court's performance is not an end in itself, but it is used to determine how effectively we are delivering legal services, because essentially that's what courts do. We resolve disputes and other matters that persons are either unable or unwilling to resolve themselves. So we need to be able to determine precisely the disposition of cases, the time that it takes to dispose of cases, and of course there's a qualitative dimension to it as well. So it's not just the numbers in and of themselves, but how we do what we do and its impact on our citizens. It is also a reflection of the fact that the judiciary takes very seriously its role as a co-equal, emphasis on the co-equal arm of government. So the executive has its functions, it sets policy, that is the Prime Minister and the Cabinet. You have the legislature, the House of Representatives and the Senate. They pass laws, and the only institution established by the Constitution to authoritatively and definitively interpret the Constitution and the laws and to develop the common law is the judiciary, not the executive. And so it is important to have these reminders, because sometimes there may be comments made and persons may be left with the incorrect impression or idea. So, for example, within recent times with regard to child diversion, there has been a view expressed that the judges are misinterpreting the law. And I wish to remind the members of the public that everybody is entitled to a view. But the only place where that can be argued and acted upon is in a court of law. So nobody, regardless of the office that they hold, can dictate to the judiciary how the law is to be interpreted. judges are guided by the actual text of the statute, not by the intention that persons may have in their brain. And the text of the statute is the collective will of the Parliament, comprising the House of Representatives and the Senate. So ministerial statements are not part of the law, and no judge acting in accordance with the judicial oath and the Constitution can take any account of that. If the view is that the law is unclear, then there's a mechanism. The mechanism is to go to Parliament, change the law to make clear what it is said to be the policy of the legislation. Because during the legislative process, a bill goes to Parliament, and as it goes through the process, the other members of Parliament, other than the promoter of the bill, they have the right and indeed the obligation to make their views known on the content of the bill. And arising out of that process, the content and the wording may change. And so there are techniques that judges bring to bear on the interpretation of legislation, and the interpretation of legislation always begins with the actual words used in the section, and the section is interpreted in the context of the law generally, and the judge has other techniques that he or she uses. So there really cannot be any direction to a judicial officer, not from the Chief Justice, not from the President of the Court of Appeal, as to how the individual judge approaches the interpretation of the statute. The judge is required to be independent in his or her thoughts. So you look at the statute, you take account of the evidence and the submissions made, and so in accordance with the judicial oath, you make the decision based on the material presented in court and not by statements outside of the judicial proceedings. That is the essence of the judicial function. And so that is what we do as part of the structure of governance. And part of the structure of governance when it comes to enforcing the law is this. As you may have heard, there are traffic days that are coming up, one in St. Catherine. And that was something planned long before there was any desire, expressed or otherwise, to collect a minimum sum from traffic fines. Let me say that as an independent judiciary, the courts are not revenue collecting agencies. Traffic offenses are criminal offenses. They are not revenue earning offenses, and their standards of the criminal law, where persons choose to come to court, are applied with full rigor. So any citizen who receives a traffic ticket and they are of the view that they wish to contest it, feel free to come to court, and it will be treated like any other allegation, because that's really what it is until it is proven, allegation of criminal conduct. So the judges are not there and will never engage in the business of arm twisting in order to meet particular revenue targets. The aim of the traffic days is to allow persons to have their matters disposed of in an orderly and controlled way. It is not designed to meet any particular revenue target, stated or otherwise. So the person shouldn't feel when they go before any judge for any traffic violation, oh my goodness, the judge is here now to help to meet the budget, and therefore I might be pressured into pleading guilty. That isn't so. If you wish to contest, contest. That's your constitutional right. So the fact that it's a traffic violation doesn't make it any less a criminal offense. And of course, the penalties can be significant, particularly for those who earn their living by driving. I'm not restricting this now to persons in the transport sector, but there are many traveling officers, persons who work on commission insurance, agents and so on, who have to traverse the island in order to earn. So just wish to make that clear that we are not part of any grand design to earn revenue for anyone. So as a modern judiciary, we have learned a number of things over the past 6 years, from 2019. And that is, an efficient judiciary has two vital components. You have the more public face of it, that is the adjudicative aspect of it, the courts, the police officers, the lawyers. That's important. But there's also an equally important aspect of it, which is the administrative dimension to it. And then we tend to see it, again, usually in the clerks and the assistant clerks that you see immediately in the court's offices and the registries. But behind that, there is an important administrative arm, the Court Administration Division, that is headed by Mrs. Tricia Cameron Anglin. And that division is a reflection of modern thinking that has come to permeate the understanding of the administration of courts and consequently the administration of justice, and ultimately it must have an impact on how we understand governance. And I have to pause here a bit because there are some points that I think need clarification. So this may take a bit of time to clarify, but I think it is necessary to clarify. And it is this. In 2016, there was an Act of Parliament, Act 9 of 2016. And that legislation put on a statutory footing the Court Administration Division to be the administrative support arm of the judiciary. That marked a very significant development, not just in Jamaica or the region, but globally, where the modern thinking is that judiciaries are to have an independent arm that is dedicated exclusively to providing the administrative support for the courts. This is part and parcel of enhancing the independence of the judiciary, of the executive branch. Prior to that, the administrative support of the judiciary came from the executive largely through the Ministry of Justice. This was examined in great detail by the team led by Professor Chevans and produced two reports, an interim report in 2006 and a final report in 2007. It's online. When you read through that report, it makes the point that the executive providing administrative support to the judiciary is incompatible with modern notions of judicial independence. And there is a book written by Professor Shetrit, an Israeli professor, who speaks to the different dimensions to judicial independence. You have administrative independence, operational independence, and financial independence. And financial independence does not mean there's a lack of accountability. So we're going to spend a bit of time now on financial independence, because there's no evidence to suggest as yet that there's any desire to be involved in the administration of justice or of the courts in a direct way. But let us speak now a bit about the financial independence. And it's going to be placed in a particular context. When you read through the statute, you will see that there are a list of functions there that the Court Administration Division, under the Director CEO of the Court Administration Division, are to provide for the courts. Data collection, human resource management, procurement, and so on. And you will also see that the director is required to produce a number of documents submitting to the Ministry of Finance in order to develop a budget. The purpose of the budget, obviously, is for the judiciary to spend in order to deliver on its mandate of efficient, effective legal services. And there has been an ongoing debate concerning this is about the maintenance of the courts as opposed to capital expenditure. And so this morning, we're going to revisit that a bit and to make the point that the courts must have greater control over its budget. If you go online to the New York Times, I think within the last 3 days, you will see that the federal judiciary in the United States have taken the unusual step of writing directly to Congress. And I believe the attached draft legislation to suggest to Congress that the federal judiciary should have greater control over its budget. Why is this? The federal courts are housed on federal property. So they are, in effect, the tenants of the federal government. But what have the judges found? Lack of maintenance. Even though 10% of their budget goes to the federal government as rent. So they have leaking buildings, non-functioning elevators, and the buildings are generally run down. So it's not a problem that's peculiar to us. So the question of judiciaries having greater control over the budget isn't something new or strange. Other judges or other judiciaries are doing so. Closer home in Guyana, the judiciary there, within the statutory framework, acquires land, makes its own court buildings, and maintains them. So this is not a new or strange phenomenon as we go along. Recently in the Bahamas, there's a Court Services Act where that agency is constituted as a fully established corporate body, has its own legal personality, and the board there is chaired by the Chief Justice. So why is this so? Because as time has gone on, particularly in the latter part of the 20th century, coming into the 21st century, there is the recognition that the judiciary cannot be truly independent unless it has more control over its financial resources and held accountable through the appropriate mechanisms because it's public funds. What are we doing with the money? What can the public expect? Why should we give you more money? These are legitimate questions to ask. So we come now to the passage of Hurricane Melissa. As you know, there was significant damage to courthouses, particularly in the western section of the island. So let us take Westmoreland. At the parish court, was it what? 2 courthouses there? 2 courtrooms or 3? 3 courtrooms at the main court. You had the family court, and then you had Whithorn. After the passage of Hurricane Melissa in Westmoreland, it was reduced to a single courtroom. So the main parish court with the 3 courtrooms, inoperable. The family court, roof blown off, cannot be used. So we're left with Whithorn. The hurricane came along and made landfall, was it October 28th? And we know the devastation. Now, as I understand it, thanks to the more recent reports of the Auditor General, there is something known as emergency procurement and how it can be done and who should do what, when, and so on. And you'd want to think that if you have a parish that had 3, or was it 2 at the family court or just 1? 2? 2 at the family court. So if you had a parish that had 3 and 2, 6 courtrooms, and you are reduced to 1 at the family court. So if you had 3, 4, 5 courtrooms, and you are reduced to 1, in a context in which the circuit court couldn't sit, it had to be transferred to Hanover. You want to think that that would constitute, by any measure, an emergency. Because it now means persons couldn't have access to justice quickly. Those in the circuit court had to take on the additional expense now, whether they are a witness or defendant, to travel to Hanover. So you either had to go down to Negril and come up the coast, or depending on where you're coming from in the parish of Westmoreland, you go to Montego Bay and come down the coast to Lucy. You have a 60-day window for this emergency procurement. So if you had 5 courtrooms and you're down to 1, and that 1 courtroom was now being used by the family court 2 days per week, the parish court 3 days per week, essentially you're adjourning matters, because you're down from 3 judges in the parish court to sitting 3 days per week. So you can't be trying cases. You're going to be putting off all the cases that were set down for that period. So too the family court. But yet, based upon the evidence now, the evidence is that there's no evidence of the emergency procurement process being activated for the court. So I'm not saying it wasn't done. It's as a judge, and I can't say it wasn't done. I have to go by the evidence. There's no evidence of it because we don't see any work going on at the parish court even up to today. So we couldn't sit back and wait and hope that the Ministry of Justice gets its act together. So we are now repairing the family court. And we are seeing about converting a building down there so that the parish court can resume, so that persons within Westmoreland can have access to justice in their parishes, and to reduce the additional burden and cost of traveling to Hanover in order for the circuit court matters to be attended to. So in Hanover now, there are 2 circuit courts that are being accommodated, not simultaneously, but one after the other usually. That is Hanover and Westmoreland. So those are the 2 circuit courts that are going on there. So this is, to me, evidence, if evidence, more evidence is needed, as to why the judiciary must have greater access to resources to deliver legal services and to really give full effect to what was outlined in the Chevron's report. Because when you read the report, particularly somewhere around paragraphs 143 onwards, Professor Chevron and his team made the point that why you need to have a proper institutional framework is that the operations of the judiciary should not depend upon the interpersonal relationship between the Chief Justice and whomever the minister may happen to be. So that is why the Court Administration Division was established and placed on a statutory footing in order to ensure that this independence is established and enhanced. And that is why when you look through this statute and it comes to the operations of the Court Administration Division, there are 2 fundamental points that are made. One is that the director of the Court Administration Division is the equivalent of a permanent secretary in terms of emoluments. The statute actually says so. It's not something that I'm making up. So it actually says so. Why does it say so? Because the director of court administration, by that, is constituted as the accounting officer under the Financial Audit Administration Act. And so when you look at the accountability framework within the statute, we submit annual reports, accounts audited by the Auditor General, and the reports go to Minister of Justice, Minister of Finance, and they are tabled in Parliament. And when you look through the statute, the person that the statute, not me now, the statute names as the person who may be called by Parliament to answer for the operations of the Court Administration Division is the Director, CEO, not the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Justice. In fact, in this statute, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Justice is mentioned once, and that is as a member of the Advisory Board. The statute does not give the Permanent Secretary, the Ministry of Justice, any role, function when it comes to the operations of the Court Administration Division. Read the statute yourself. Don't take my word for it. And the statute makes it very clear that the Court Administration Division reports to the Chief Justice of Jamaica. So there is no confusion as to the line of authority. And when the statute was established, the statute removed the difficulty that arose when you had the court management services. Because the court management services that preceded the CAD was established administratively and therefore still reporting to the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Justice. The executive of the day took the view into the late 2015, because we go back and look at the debates in Parliament. Again, don't take it from me. Look at the Hansard. 2015 coming into 2016. The Parliament decided that the Court Management Services Division was not meeting the standard to create an independent judiciary operationally. And hence, it was now placed at a higher level. An Act of Parliament, the second highest source of law in our constitutional structure. And when you read through the debates in Parliament, both the government members and the opposition members, there was not a single dissenting voice. So that was the structure that was set up. So there were three things that were retained by the ministry under the statute: provision of cars, data, major capital works. 2 have been transferred to the CAD. 1 is left. This is major capital works. And therein lies the difficulty. So they have control over major capital works. And so, I am a layman, but just looking at the courthouse in Westmoreland, it does not require special genius to figure out that the repairs to that court would be in excess of $200 million, because you're talking about roof, furniture, electronics, wiring, equipment, and so on. So if that doesn't qualify as major capital works, not many things will. And if the period, the 60 days commencing October 28, 60 days counting from there, doesn't qualify as an emergency, what else will? You go to the adjoining parish of St. Elizabeth. Total loss as far as Black River is concerned. So we are now down to 3 courtrooms in Black River. Well, 4. 2 up at Balaclava, 2 in Santa Cruz. 1 in Santa Cruz, you have the police station below. That's the only court that has been repaired by the ministry. And I suspect, because the floor of our court is the roof of the police station. So until it was repaired, whenever the rains fell, it went right through the floor to the police officers downstairs. So I know that the Ministry of National Security and the police officers were rightly concerned. What is happening here? And so that was repaired. Duncan's is still leaking. So again, according to the Observer yesterday, Hurricane Melissa, these are all facts I am stating, not my personal views, has been reclassified as the 3rd most powerful hurricane ever in the Atlantic hurricane season. And The article went on to point out that there was an instrument called a drop sound that at one point was used to measure the wind speed. And what the article told us was that at one point the wind speed was recorded at 252 miles per hour. That is what affected Jamaica last year. So my point is simply this. If the devastation caused by Hurricane Melissa cannot activate emergency procurement procedures to carry out capital works, what will? That's the question, you know. What will? So the containers went down to Santa Cruz, but they weren't retrofitted containers. All these are facts. So you may draw your own conclusions. But my point is, I do not think, in light of all of this, there should really be any further debate as to whether the court should have greater access to resources to carry out its responsibilities. So we now know from this experience, and I've said to Mrs. Cameron Anglin, that going forward, in the light of the absence of response, we have to put ourselves in a position to ensure that a critical arm of government functions even after a Category 5 hurricane. So we now know that within the building industry there are containers and buildings of all sorts that are mobile. We now know this. The technology has now been developed. So we have to put ourselves in a position, and we have 9 coastal courts. And when I say 9 courts, they are within like 50 to 100 feet of the sea. So we now know what we are dealing with. So we have to put ourselves in a position that if and when, hopefully it doesn't, another devastation of that nature comes, we must be able to have access to funds to get suitable alternate accommodation, whether in the form of containers or otherwise. And what are we going to be looking at? Accommodation for staff, accommodation for records, accommodation for court users. So the judges are trying down in Westmoreland, so when they go down to the main court, the judge is sitting in his car, trying to attend to people that come and stand under the tent. And when the rain comes, court ends. This is down in, if you go down into Savannah Lamar by the court. It's not imagination. This is what is happening. When they go up to Whitehorn, you're just putting off the cases. So as it stands now, until we complete the renovation of the family court, not much work is being done there. And so you have the additional cost now of travel to Hanover, where the economy of the parish is not yet generating pre-Melissa economic activity to say that these persons now have these additional sums. So when we talk about the judiciary taking on responsibility seriously, this is what we are talking about. So that is why when you heard that we are members of the International Consortium for Court Excellence, Standing International Forum of Commercial Courts, the International Judicial Dispute Resolution Network, and members of the International Association for Court Administrators, why are we members of those associations? Because it is the way in which we see and learn from what other judiciaries are doing across the world to deliver efficient legal. So we hear from, in these fora, you hear from judges from the Ukraine, that even in the midst of war, courts go on. You hear from judges who they take time off to go and do their time on the front line as soldiers and then come back to court. So that is what is happening in the Ukraine. Judges will tell you that while they are in court, they can hear the sounds of battle down the road. But justice has to be delivered. Things are still happening. So these organizations give us ideas, and we tell them about what we are doing. So when we talk about the data and the statistics, it's not to boast or as an end in itself, but to give an idea as to what it is that we are doing. And so we strengthen accountability. We translate vision into measurable targets. We identify problems early and respond quickly. Allocate resources wisely. Protect judicial independence through credible self-assessment. And none of that is possible without strong administrative support, which you will hear more about the details of that as to how CAD has been reorganized to deliver services and what has been happening in the parish courts. And then I think I have said enough already, and you're going to be hearing from the senior judge of the parish court for the traffic court, Rona Mrs. Beaumont Daly, to tell you about this wonderful and remarkable journey from the chaos when the traffic deadline of 3 years ago to where we are now and our expectations for this year. So other things that you may wish to ask may come out in the question and answer session concerning the specific data concerning the Supreme Court, what you hear from the President of the Court of Appeal and also the Chief Judge of the Parish Court, but now you'll hear from her Honor, Mrs. Beaumont Daly. So thank you very much.
Good morning, all. Thank you, Chief Justice, for the opportunity to speak on the strategic initiatives that we have implemented at the Traffic Court to meaningfully reduce and ultimately eliminate the backlog of cases that have accumulated over time. Since 2023, the Court has undertaken a deliberate, comprehensive reform agenda aimed at strengthening efficiency, improving case flow management, and restoring timely access to justice. We recognize that backlog is not merely an administrative concern. It has implications for confidence, road safety enforcement, procedural fairness, and the overall credibility of the justice system. I'm going to outline the principal measures that have driven this transformation. The first pillar of reform was a significant expansion of night court operations and the introduction of Saturday court sittings. In late 2022, night court operations were limited to a single courtroom setting, 4 evenings per week. In 2023, this was expanded to 4 courts operating 4 nights weekly, supplemented by Saturday sittings. This expansion represents not just an increase in hours, but a decisive multiplication of judicial capacity, as several judges of the parish courts across the island have sat at the traffic court both on weeknights and Saturdays to assist in clearing the backlog of cases. Their collaboration reflects a judiciary united in purpose and committed to ensuring that justice is delivered in a timely manner. Now, the second initiative addressed a critical underlying contributor to backlog: dormant and inactive matters. We established a special search team mandated to identify and organize dormant case files, notify accused persons of their outstanding matters and new court dates, as well as ensuring that cases are properly prepared and listed for night and Saturday sittings. This initiative represented a proactive administrative intervention, as it not only brought dormant matters back into active judicial circulation, but minimized adjournments and enhanced efficiency. The third initiative focused on enforcement integrity and real-time technological integration. A comprehensive warrant audit was undertaken to assess all outstanding matters, and where it was found that there were cases where warrants had not been issued, prepared but transmitted, and required urgent follow-up, immediate corrective steps were taken to address same. In addition, to prevent reoccurrence of administrative delays, computers were installed in each courtroom to facilitate real-time entry of case outcomes into the Ticket Information Management System, that is called TIMS. The introduction of real-time data entry has significantly reduced the gap between judicial pronouncement and enforcement action, thereby strengthening both efficiency and credibility. The fourth transformative initiative has been the restructuring of the court's operational model to allow for differentiated and efficient case progression. As you may be aware, there are 3 courtrooms at the Corporate Area Traffic Court, which is spread across 2 locations. Previously, the 2 courts at the Melbourne location addressed ticketable offences only, whilst Transport Authority matters and other offences were brought by way of information were heard at 36 Camp Road location. This configuration, while functional, did not allow for optimal case flow segmentation. And so the restructured model, which took effect on May 2025, it now provides a fast-track court, a case management court, and a dedicated trial court. Straightforward matters, as well as warrants, are efficiently disposed of in the fast-track court. Contested matters requiring further judicial oversight and readiness assessment are actively managed in the case management court, and then they are sent to the dedicated trial court for focused adjudication. This reorganization introduces a disciplined case progression pathway, thereby reducing adjournments, enhancing scheduling predictability, and trial date certainty. In conclusion, the initiatives implemented since 2023 reflect a comprehensive, multi-layered strategy grounded in innovation, collaboration, and accountability. Through expanded sittings, adaptive use of space, interjudicial cooperation, increased administrative oversight, technological integration, and structural reform, the traffic court has significantly strengthened its capacity to address the backlog while safeguarding due process. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Honorable Chief Justice for his dedicated leadership, the Chief Judge of the Parish Court, and the judges of the parish courts across the island, as well as staff within the corporate area, who have given a considerable amount of their time to this cause. And lastly, but certainly not least, the dedicated traffic court team, both staff and judges, who have served often beyond extraordinary expectations, have made this progress possible. While infrastructural and human resource constraints, as well as rising case intake, remain ongoing challenges, our resolve is firm. We will continue to refine our processes, measure our performance, and uphold the constitutional mandate to deliver justice fairly and efficiently in a timely manner. Thank you.
Right, so just to give some data concerning the courts. As you know, our time standard is 24 months, generally. And the time standard has been reduced for the parish courts. So we're now down to a maximum of 20 months for criminal cases and 18 months for civil cases. So the Chief Judge of the Parish Court will speak more to that. But at the Supreme Court, so the point that we're making is that improvements are happening, notwithstanding the constraints. The sticking point has been at the Supreme Court, particularly the Civil Division, where the average time is 48.5 months. That's roughly 4 years. And we think that that is unacceptable. when you look at the data, a significant 60% of the cases are personal injury cases, which means that somebody has suffered some injury, some more serious than others, and they are seeking to have compensation. The delay is unfair for a number of reasons. Firstly, in relation to the claimant who has a legitimate claim now, who can be successful, they are out of pocket and in pain for an extended period of time. As far as the defendant is concerned, as you know, in civil matters, the courts are allowed to apply interest to special damages, that is the sum that you pay to your doctor and you go and get medication and all of those kinds of things. So the court is allowed to apply interest to that. And then on general damages, that is for pain and suffering and backache and headache, and you could run up and down and play football, but now for 2 hours now you can only do it for 1 hour. You get compensation for all of those things, and you can get interest on that. So what that means in practical terms is that if you have a defendant who says, okay, I accept liability, I am not going to be really contesting this claim, but the longer it takes in the court, the longer the period of interest. So the defendant ends up paying interest on general damages, on special damages, for longer than he or she ought to. I think this is one of the contributing factors to your insurance premiums on your motor car, but that's another story. So that's a link there. So we have implemented a docket system with about 4 judges where we took a special look at these kinds of cases. And what we have noticed, certainly over the last 18 months, is that when we took a set of cases and put them within this docket system, that is to say, they were allocated to judges, supported by 2 masters who did the work between filing and coming into court, 60% of the cases were disposed of in about 18 months. So we are going to be introducing a full docket system in the Supreme Court come September. Increases accountability on the part of the judges, so it will reduce the temptation to just adjourn the matters, because it's going to be staying with you until it is disposed of. And so by so doing, we'll reduce the time that it takes to move from filing to disposition to get down to our 24-month time standard for the Supreme Court. The other courts that have been taking a bit of time is the family division, roughly 44 months. We are doing some work there as well. And also the rural circuit courts, 43 months roughly for disposition. With the rural courts, there's a particular problem there. The particular problem is this: the circuit system that was established many years ago has run its course. It's not fit for purpose anymore, if for no other reason that the volume of cases has outgrown the time available to hear those cases. So on average, the circuit court goes out once per Supreme Court term. That's 4 weeks. That's 20 days. And if it falls within a period of a holiday, like National Heroes Day or anything like that, then you're down to 19 days. And so when you have a circuit like with 200 cases, 300 cases, and so on, it really cannot be done. Even if everybody wanted to plead guilty, you still couldn't do all of them within the 20 days. And so there needs to be a fundamental shift now in how we manage our circuit courts. I've been proposing, I think it is accepted conceptually, to have centralized courts since we have improved road network, we have centralized courts, major trial centers located in one part. For example, let's just use Manchester. So if you have a major trial center in Manchester, where you have like 3 or 4 circuit courts there, and you're taking the cases from Clarendon, Manchester, and St. Elizabeth, and they come up there and you sit continuously in the same way that you do at the home circuit court. That, I think, is the way forward to manage the list, because what happens is that we are now in what is called the Hillary term. So if your matter isn't disposed of here, then it's another 3 months or 4 months to the Easter term. If it's not disposed of there, then it goes on to the Michaelmas term. And so before you know it, the case is in the court 3-4 years and not disposed of. A number of things happen. One, you start with the defendant. The defendant who is on bail, who has restricted movement. They can't keep steady employment. It's very, very difficult, because oftentimes, depending on the nature of the case, the judge may impose a curfew order, so you have to be essentially at home for particular periods of time. May place a stop order on them so they can't take up overseas employment and so on. So it affects the defendant personally, and by extension, the defendant's family. He may be an economic contributor to the household, and so the ability to earn is restricted. So that's on the defendant side. On the witness side, the stress now of coming to court, market is stress for the defendant as well. But when you have the stress now of having to come to court, particularly when you're dealing with either very personal matters, sexual assault, it's always very personal. You maybe have witnessed a particular violent incident. And so you have to be essentially preparing yourself to come to court all the time, re-traumatizing yourself several times over a number of years in order to attend court. So we think that there are just debilitating consequences when the cases are not disposed of within an acceptable time frame. And also, it ties up the resources of other agencies. You have the police, you have the lawyers, you have the forensic services. All of those resources are tied up until the case is finally disposed of. So that inefficiency is not just the business of judges and lawyers, but it has a knock-on effect across the country. It affects households. Persons have to take more time off than necessary to attend court. So all of those are attendant consequences there. So that is the solution that we are proposing there. Just to let you know as well that the revenue court downtown has been backlog free for some time and remains so. So that is doing well there. The Western Regional Gun Court, the clearance rate of 68%, holding its own but not where we would like to be. And the Corporate Area Traffic Court, as you have heard, has improved significantly. And so the purpose of sharing with you this information, which you can get more into, is to give you an indication as to how well we are doing. So our High Court Division of the Gun Court in Kingston, we are taking an average of 16 months from filing to hearing matters. We still have some older matters from 2023, but generally we are now actually trying 2025 cases and a few 2026 cases. So that is one of the benefits of an efficient court. And because of, in Westmoreland, which you will hear more about from the judge, acting senior chief judge who was actually there, that is one of the saving graces in Westmoreland now. Because it was a backlog-free court, the inefficiency won't be as devastating. So when you are efficient and you have reduced your backlog, you can actually absorb the shocks that come from disruption better. So that is one of the benefits, real benefits of having a backlog-free court. So there are many benefits to it. It's not just a matter of having data for the sake of data, but there are real objective contributions to the society as a whole. And so those are the additional comments that I would make, and you have heard enough from me until question time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chief Justice, for your expansive presentation, sir. At this time, I'm going to invite the President of the Court of Appeal to make her remarks on the reforms that have been taking place in the Court of Appeal. As I indicated earlier, and for those persons who are just coming in, the President is making her presentation online. She will be available to field your questions in relation to the Court of Appeal. And rest assured, we will be available to field your questions in relation to all that is being said here. Just before the President comes, I invite you to turn your attention to the screens for this video, which gives an overview of her presentation. Thank you so much.
The Court of Appeal plays a central role in maintaining consistency and confidence in the administration of justice. Its work ensures that decisions of the courts are reviewed carefully, the law is applied uniformly, and legal standards remain clear and reliable. Over the past year, the court has advanced reforms aimed at strengthening performance and accountability, improving judgment delivery, reducing outstanding matters, and increasing certainty in hearing schedules. At the same time, preparations are underway for ISO 9001:2015 certification, establishing structured processes and measurable service standards. These developments support not only the efficiency of the Court of Appeal, but also the broader modernization of the judiciary. Through data-driven management, organizational reform, and continuous improvement, the court continues to build a system where decisions are timely, procedures are transparent, and public confidence is reinforced. The following address outlines the progress made and the direction ahead for the Court of Appeal and the justice system it serves.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and the Honorable Chief Justice for the opportunity to share with you about the significance of the Court of Appeal in the judicial system and the work we are doing here. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I hope I'm coming across clearly. Yes. Thank you. With Jamaica's attainment of independence in 1962, the architects of the Constitution purposefully and thoughtfully established the Court of Appeal of Jamaica. This action was not taken lightly. Rather, it reflected a clear and essential intent to ensure that every Jamaican would possess the unequivocal right to seek review of decisions made by lower courts and specialized tribunals before a court that is institutionally independent of the Supreme Court of which it was once a part. By embedding this right to appeal to an independent court as an intermediate appellate body, the framers of our Constitution guaranteed that irrespective of one's background or personal circumstances, all persons within its jurisdiction can anticipate justice that is administered with impartiality and fairness. This safeguard ensures that individuals are not forced to accept outcomes they believe to be unjust without the opportunity for further review within Jamaica. The court provides every person the assurance that should they feel dissatisfied with the decision handed down by a lower court or tribunal, there exists a mechanism for their case to be reconsidered. This right to appeal is fundamental to maintaining public confidence in the justice system and reinforces the principle that justice must be accessible, impartial, and responsive to all, regardless of circumstance. At this time in the nation's history, the Court of Appeal is the highest court in Jamaica for the great majority of appeals, as only a very small number of cases reach the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, that we all know is Jamaica's final appellate authority. Therefore, the court does more than just solve individual cases. Its decisions help guide all other courts in Jamaica and binds the decisions to be made in all other courts, making the law clearer and more consistent. This helps everyone, citizens, businesses, and the government, to know what to expect from our legal system, and that should build trust in how our laws are applied. In short, the Court of Appeal is important because it guarantees that everything is done fairly in the interest of the people of the nation and those who come within our borders. It supports the stability of the legal framework on which the public depends for the peaceful settlement of their disputes. Now, permit me to just give a few reflections on the past year. The past year has been one of transition, reflection, and progress, despite many challenges, including the impact of Hurricane Melissa. We honored the contributions of members of the court who have passed on. We marked the retirement of a president and a judge of appeal. We welcomed new judges, judicial council, and other members of staff. Appointment as the first female president of the court, widely lauded as historic, is more importantly an event that reinforces the court's ongoing commitment to continuity of service and institutional excellence. I will not just now share some reforms and organizational developments. The Court of Appeal, as part of the wider judiciary and through the judiciary's strategic plan, is committed to creating and preserving a modern, transparent, and accountable judiciary. The Court of Appeal must ensure that the public we serve trusts that the rule of law is robust in Jamaica. This trust is what makes our justice system work and helps keep our nation strong through every challenge. With all this in mind, upon assuming office, I reorganized the aspects of the court's management structure, assigning each judge defined oversight responsibilities for court operations. The purpose of this initiative is practical. It is to strengthen internal systems, improve coordination, enhance staff welfare, and deepen engagement with court users and stakeholders. The court has also undertaken broader reform efforts to modernize our operations and to align them with international standards for court administration. As part of this thrust towards modernization and the achievement of international standards in appellate court operations, I began my own tenure by designing a leadership framework for the Office of the President of the Court of Appeal. I did that all by myself, of course, with the assistance of AI. The purpose of this framework is to provide a clear role definition for the President of the Court. This approach is intended to deliver significant benefits. Firstly, it ensures that the President's responsibilities and expectations are transparent. This should serve to foster accountability and clarity for both the judiciary and the wider public. Secondly, a well-defined framework supports strategic decision-making and helps guide the court through transitions and challenges such as those we experienced in the past year. It also establishes consistent leadership standards, encouraging continuity and institutional excellence across successive administration. Furthermore, the framework aims to foster a culture of collaboration and shared responsibility among judges and staff, improve coordination, and strengthen the overall effectiveness of the court's operations. Ultimately, such a leadership framework not only supports the President in fulfilling her duties, but also contributes to the stability, resilience, and ongoing development of the Court of Appeal as an institution of excellence. Consistent with this pursuit of reputational excellence, and following the Chief Justice's recommendation, and I dare say persistence, preparations are now in high gear for the Court of Appeal to achieve ISO 9001-2015 certification before the end of the next financial year. ISO certification 2015 refers to the standards set by the International Organization for Standardization. This certification establishes globally recognized requirements for quality management system. It shows or attests that an organization has good systems for management quality. It means the organization, in this case the Court of Appeal, follows clear rules to provide reliable services, meet customer needs, and continually improve its operations. So the effort is more than just following rules. Certification means the court must have clear steps for how things are done, set goals to measure how well those things work, write down its procedures, and always check to make sure services are meeting standards. For the Court of Appeal, this leads to better organization in handling cases, clearer communication, and greater responsibility and accountability within the team. So to this end, consultants have conducted a comprehensive gap audit to identify areas for improvement. We are scheduled to have our first internal audit conducted during April of this year, with the first external audit to follow in or around June. These audits will determine our readiness for certification. Now, the benefits of ISO certification will extend beyond the Court of Appeal because, as already indicated, we are an appellate court, and so our processes influence practices throughout the entire judiciary. Establishing internationally recognized standards at this level supports consistency across the justice system, and it ought to more strengthen public confidence and contribute to the development of a modern judiciary grounded in a reliable, efficient, and transparent procedural framework. Now, to briefly review our performance, let me just say this. The court's performance data for 2024 is detailed in our latest annual report, which is available. I will not go back to those statistics because they are there for everyone to see. I will just say that we're currently compiling the 2025 statistics, and as such are not yet able to present definitive and reliable figures. Nevertheless, preliminary assessments indicate that our 2025 performance trajectory closely mirrors that of 2024. While there appears to be a modest decline in the total number of reserved judgments delivered in the past year compared with 2024, our judgment delivery rate is still expected to remain far above international standards. Other key performance indicators also appear positive on early checks. However, we await the final confirmation from our statisticians before providing a more detailed breakdown of the numbers or from drawing specific conclusions about our performance for the most recent period, that is the year ending 2025. One thing I know and can say with confidence is that even if the data for 2025 show marked improvements, we remain mindful that there are critical areas that require our serious and continued attention. The backlog of reserved judgments is one such area, if not the most pressing. It remains a major concern for those awaiting their decisions. To address this, we have taken on a number of measures which time does not allow me to detail. However, I will just say this, that we have initiated the compilation of legal summaries to make commonly applied legal principles readily available at our fingertips, therefore assisting in more expeditious judgment preparation. We're also increasingly using judiciary-approved AI tools to assist us in drafting and editing within the permissible ambit of the judiciary's AI policy. However, getting rid of the backlog is not a single factor fix. It will take ongoing monitoring, better preparation, and careful scheduling of our cases. We are committed, nevertheless, to finding practical solutions so that judgments can be delivered within the time standards established by the Judicial Conduct Guidelines, or if longer, at least within a reasonable time, without compromising quality or fairness. Now, as we look forward to the future, I will say that there's a commitment on our part to modernization and excellence. The Court of Appeal remains steadfast in its efforts to evolve into a modern appellate court of excellence, distinguished by its ability to deliver decisions promptly, uphold rigorous standards, and play a pivotal role in fostering a judiciary that commands the public's enduring confidence in the justice system. Our ongoing pursuit of these objectives is rooted in a strategy that emphasizes strong, decisive leadership, continuous technological advancement, and the adoption of innovative practices. We are committed to strengthening our communication channels and deepening our engagement with all stakeholders, therefore supporting greater transparency in our operations. Furthermore, our dedication to ongoing professional development ensures that our operations remain dynamic and exemplary, positioning us to respond effectively to the needs of the justice system. I want to salute my team players, my teammates, as I call them at the Court of Appeal, a very dedicated bunch that we have here, and we are committed to continue in the service of the nation by doing more that we can do to achieve excellence. So, as we position ourselves, we'll seek to respond effectively to the needs of all those we serve and the expectations of the public that we serve in accordance with our mission statement. I thank you for the opportunity once again, and I am willing, I suppose, to answer any questions that may be posed for me. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Madam President, for that informative presentation. We are now going to hear, ladies and gentlemen, from the Chief Judge of the Parish Court. And just to assure you, we are going to be fielding your questions this morning. We're going to hear from the Chief Judge of the Parish Courts. He's going to be followed briefly by Mrs. Cameron Anglin, and then we'll open the floor. There's a microphone that is placed at the back of the room. We just ask that you go to the microphone. You can introduce yourselves and then ask your questions. Thank you so much.
So let me extend a pleasant greeting of morning to everyone. And certainly, as you got the opportunity to hear from the Chief Justice, you recognize now why it is that we are hailing him as a quite astute and dynamic leader. So intimately acquainted is he with what happens at all levels. He may well have said much of what I wish to say and to share with you. But of course, that is a testament to how much he cares about the judiciary that he leads. For many citizens, the parish court represents their primary interaction with the justice system. Public confidence is therefore shaped not only by judicial decisions, but whatever matters are heard in a timely, orderly, and predictable manner. The parish courts, I can presently and happily declare, are presently regarded as operating without a backlog. And some might wonder, what does that mean? It really means that there are fewer than 5% of active cases that are older than 24 months. And certainly, from what you have heard from the Chief Justice, we are not content in meeting international standards. We are content in achieving our very best. And so we continue in that vein to, over the period, to direct our attention to preserving that position and improving it to maintain access to justice despite significant operational disruptions. The parish courts continue to prioritize transparency, efficiency, and resilience in the delivery of justice. We are currently modernizing court processes by introducing digital recording and transcription systems, which have commenced in the Kingston and St. Andrew Parish Court Criminal Division. These efforts will greatly assist with case progression and the timely preparation of notes of evidence. These measures align with the judiciary's strategic focus on improving access to justice and procedural efficiency. During the past year, the court staff participated in training exercise concerning the judicial case management system and have also been exposed to updated record procedures geared towards strengthening document tracking and supporting more efficient movement of cases through the courts. This reduces the likelihood of matters being relisted simply to await documentation and allows hearings to advance when parties attend. Unmistakably, Hurricane Melissa has had and continues to have a significant impact on court operations, particularly across the Western region. And you have heard much of what the courts have been contending with the loss of a courtroom and the loss of courtroom stock. But I wondered if I could perhaps illustrate it in a more forceful way. When you contend, as the Chief Justice has told you, I speak from a place of personal knowledge, where you would have 3 judges sitting for 5 days, you would say that you would have 15 court sittings. When you truncate it to the point where it is we are sharing court facilities with the family court, you are asking 15 court sittings to be truncated into 3 sittings for the parish court. I hope that brings it into sharp focus, why it is that we cannot be content in having it persist the way it has for much longer. So while operations across some courts are largely normalized, the delayed pace of restoration efforts has meant that the courtroom stock has been greatly reduced, and of course, I've said that has particular implications. Efforts have been made to accommodate matters that have been displaced, and you have heard we have had to consider where matters can be heard in neighboring parishes and the like. And to that end, we are actually looking forward, as the Chief Justice has said, we're not content to sit on our laurels and wait if it is that we can act decisively. And in that vein, we are looking and projected to complete restoration at the Westmoreland Family Court by March, that is to say the month to follow, which should greatly assist in stabilizing listing patterns and reduce accumulated delays. Now, alongside these adjustments, target initiatives have been implemented that seek to address what is a gross backlog. And perhaps at some point we'll get the opportunity to explain the difference between the gross backlog and the net backlog. And of course, you have heard what the traffic court, I beg your pardon, has managed to do in that respect. And that blueprint has been adopted by a number of courts in respect of addressing what we understand to be something we are not content in having it remain. Now, as you have known, we rely very heavily on statistical data. And beyond that, we are being attentive to the needs highlighted through stakeholder engagements. And that has prompted the adoption of strategies designed to achieve greater efficiency. One such example is the specialized attention given to fraud-related matters at the Kingston and St. Andrew Parish Court Criminal Division in an effort to advance complex fraud matters, allowing these matters to be addressed in a more focused and timely manner. The gathering of the statistics by itself will not produce the results you wish. It is simply for us to evaluate and then to be guided accordingly how we can more targetedly address and push our resources to achieve the results that we need. I have highlighted here on my script much of the statistical information that is available on the Supreme Court website, and those documents are there for your made available to the public because the judiciary believes in accountability. And so it is that we don't want it to be by way of conjecture. There must be a truth that is revealed in the numbers. And so that is why it is that there is this reliance on making sure that we fully disclose how it is that we are performing. Certainly, we eagerly await the opening of the new court facilities at the Morant Bay Urban Center, which will achieve improved access to court services by allowing matters to be heard in a modern and purpose-built location close to court users for the parish of St. Thomas. And I wish, perhaps, at this juncture to say, I wish to see the silver lining. Because, of course, the message that we are leaving and we wish to convey is that there's something that requires immediate attention. We do not take it for granted that even before the passage of the storm, we did not have what we needed. And so this is perhaps an opportunity to, with the displacement, to now be more targeted in how it is that we treat to achieve and to have purpose-built facilities. And the Chief Justice has mentioned what he has said as well, where it is that we see perhaps how we could benefit from having designed, fit-for-purpose justice centers available and making justice available for all. We believe in public education initiatives as well, and they are encouraged as evidenced by the recently hosted traffic symposium in the parish of St. Mary at the St. Mary Parish Court, and there is to be an upcoming bail symposium to be hosted at the Portland Parish Court. Certainly, as you can imagine, when we look and evaluate, there is, as the Chief Justice has remarked, that you come to appreciate that certain practices that obtained then can outlive its purpose. And that is what it is that you can even now see where it is that persons who before now would not have embraced artificial intelligence are prepared to do so. Because we are at a place where it is that we must contend with what is available and to put it to the best use. So in that vein, we have specialized courts. And what's so specialized courts is the family court. And with the family court, they have thought it appropriate to have what is called an appointment-based scheduling system. And they continue to strengthen same with a view to reducing waiting times and to provide a more structured environment for court users, particularly for children and vulnerable persons that attend court. And also, the coroner's court and the special coroner's court have also demonstrated improvements in respect of operating without a backlog and have demonstrated the ability to persist in that respect. The courts have multiple functions, and these functions involve intervention-based systems as well. And one such example is the drug treatment court. In that way, we understand that we are not to contend simply with the notion of punishment, but rehabilitation still echoes largely in our contemplation. The parish court remains committed to ensuring that matters progress in an organized and predictable manner so that persons attending court can reasonably expect their cases to be heard and advanced. We are also concerned with the welfare of our own internal stakeholders, being mindful of health and safety concerns. With ongoing safety audits, infrastructural assessment, and upgrades to improve working conditions, in addition to training seminars for judges and court staff to improve their knowledge base, attention is also being given to the promotion of mental health and well-being. Relief efforts inter alia through the Court Administration Division have also been undertaken in the parishes most affected by Hurricane Melissa. And at this point, I crave your indulgence as I pause to recognize the Herculean human efforts of judges, court operations managers, clerk of the courts, deputy clerk of the courts, assistant, the entire court staff that have, although themselves impacted so negatively in this period, did not allow that to be an excuse in respect of how committed they were in respect of their efforts to resume court services, appreciating the importance of that to every Jamaican. And so to that extent, I wish to applaud their efforts. So overall, despite the disruptions caused by Hurricane Melissa and infrastructural challenges in some regions, the parish courts have maintained continuity of service through adaptive measures targeted to backlog initiatives and procedural innovations. These combined measures underscore the judiciary's commitment to timely, accessible, and responsive justice delivery across the entire island. As you can imagine, I've sought to spare you as long a script as I have here, because I know we want the opportunity to field your questions. So I offer my thanks at this time.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I have the distinction of speaking last to a room that would rather hear less of me. And so I will bear that in mind as I progress. You see, we often talk about the judiciary in terms of statutes and precedents. But for a mother in St. Elizabeth this morning, waiting on a child support order, or a small business owner in Kingston seeking to resolve a commercial dispute, the judiciary isn't an abstract concept. It is, in fact, a lifeline. The vision of a modern, world-class institution is bold, but a vision without a roadmap is just a headline. And so the Court Administration Division is that roadmap. Today, I am here to report that we are steadily moving from the era of the file is missing to the era of the system is ready. The Hurricane Melissa, proof of concept. Walk with me. This past year, our resilience was put to the test. You've heard it. Category 5 Hurricane Melissa, we've lived it. Historically, a storm of this magnitude would have shuttered our courts for months. However, because the CAD had already implemented 100% satellite internet in our western parishes and parish courts, and established off-site disaster recovery systems in 2 separate locations, the story was different. Most remarkably, in St. Elizabeth and Westmoreland, the hardest hit areas, courts were operational within 30 days because records were fully digitized on the judicial case management system. Justice didn't have to wait for the debris to be cleared. We procured and are in the process of deploying 15 prefabricated building solutions. I don't like to call them containers. Prefabricated building solutions. They're moving ready to serve as immediate courtrooms and administrative offices, ensuring that restoration work never halted the wheels of justice. Let's turn to modernization by numbers quickly. For the journalists in this room, I want to be specific about the digital transformation we're driving. Modernization is not a vague goal for the judiciary. It is a measurable reality. So in 25-26 financial year alone, we completed a comprehensive threat evaluation and launched a plan to bulletproof our judicial data, or cybersecurity program. We deployed 115 e-signature licenses. What's the significance of that? Let's take the traffic court, for example. Judges now use the Sign Easy application daily. So they are signing thousands of warrants in real time, a volume that previously took months of manual processing. Let's look at hardware overall. We have disseminated over 650 new laptops and desktops across the island to ensure that our staff have the tools to match their talents. We have implemented island-wide 20 additional courtrooms to support our virtual courtroom initiative. This isn't just about video calls. It's about high-fidelity evidence display and reducing the massive security costs and risks associated with prisoner transport. We are breaking the handwritten barrier. We have piloted digital transcription services in the Supreme Court. This replaces the handwritten records with audio recording and the software-generated transcripts, moving us from a turnaround time of months to a matter of hours. People and tools, scaling the organization. We recognize that tools are only as effective as the people wielding them. And so as Oscar Wilde said, success is a science. If you have the conditions, then you get the result. So to create those conditions, CAD enacted a rigorous organizational review. To meet the demands of a modern Jamaica, we have successfully acquired 599 new and upgraded posts. And we have trained every records officer, data capture officer, and clerk of court in the country on the new National Standard Operating Procedures for records, the first of their kind for our judiciary. We are also safeguarding legal rights. A court record is the physical embodiment of a citizen's legal rights. So with the UNDP support, we are establishing regional records management centers in Kingston and Hanover. And through the judicial case management system, the deployment of 50 industrial scanners, we will be able to achieve a critical milestone. What is this? The home and rural circuits, revenue, probate, and gun courts, 90% of our family courts are now digitized. So we are effectively ending the era of the paper-only dependency. Let's talk about jury administration. Finally, we are tackling the unpredictability of hearings. Between December 2025 and January 2026, a targeted public education campaign resulted in 70 additional citizens reporting for jury service at the Supreme Court. We have also modernized the thank you for that service. Juror compensation is now processed via direct electronic transfer, with 6.9 million paid out to date. We are also preparing for the proposed $6,000 per day, which will further strengthen the certainty that when a trial is listed, it proceeds. Ladies and gentlemen, efficient justice requires more than a brilliant judge. It requires a dependable foundation. It requires a roof that doesn't leak, a server that doesn't crash, and a record that cannot be lost. We are not just at the Court Administration Division buying laptops. We are building a sanctuary for the rights of every Jamaican. Whether you are in a high-tech courtroom in Kingston or a prefabricated office in Westmoreland or Duncans, your day in court is now guaranteed, it is protected, and it is respected. The road to a world-class judiciary is long. But as of today, we are no longer just dreaming of the future. We are operating in it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Cameron Anglin. Again, the microphone is at the back of the room. You can make your way to the microphone and indicate your question and to whom you are posing that question. I'm going to ask the technical team if we can see the president in the screens, please. And also, we will be taking questions from those persons who are online. Yes, go ahead.
Good morning. It's Siobhan Campbell from Nationwide News. My first question is to the Chief Justice. You speak about the need for financial independence for the judiciary, and you made a good point about the not willing to make that an issue of the disposition of the government of the day. But is it a realistic expectation when the budget of the judiciary is essentially tethered to the central government and essentially falls within that pool of having to compete with other ministries, organizations for scarce resources, particularly after a crisis such as Hurricane Melissa? How do you rectify those two concerns?
Well, two things. A few years ago, I was invited to a meeting. And at that meeting, the Ministry of Finance introduced us to the idea of what they called medium-term results-based budgeting. As it was explained to me, it was the idea that the institutions that are directly responsible for the delivery of the service should be the ones responsible for developing the budget. The budget is going to be based upon now your strategic plan, your operational plan, and so on. So the idea was that you would get the amount to run the organization, the usual bills, utilities, and salaries. But beyond that, you needed to demonstrate, using your strategic plan, what you intend to achieve, how you intend to get there. In other words, if we give you this sum of money, what do we expect to see at the end? And this is why the strategic plan is important with measures and so on. So I do not see it so much as competition, but to indicate what are the benefits that the population is going to derive from this. So we are not, it is not taking budget from anywhere else. The fact of the matter is that the sums have been allocated, and since you say that you're from Nationwide, I know that you have the capability to do the research, to find out, for example, how much money has actually been allocated for repairs of the courts over the last 3 or 4 financial years. And from my own assessment, it has been at least $1.3 billion has been allocated. So the issue is not money. It is the use of the money during the period, because the ministry is on record as saying we return millions every year. So that statement alone proves the point. It is not a money issue, because the money is there. Because if you can't return what you don't have, so you either spend it or you return it. So the question now is, how do we organize ourselves with your operational plan, with your strategic plan, to meet your goals and objectives? And on our side, what does the data say? What do the data say? It says that we spend over 90% of our budget. And that is what we continue to do. That is why we are now repairing the family court down in Westmoreland, and we are now preparing this accommodation for the courts. So the money that we have, we are utilizing. So it is not, so the problem here in Jamaica, I have said, is not a lack of money, because you can't do everything in any one year. It is really how you plan and how you execute. And that is what we have been able to demonstrate over time. So I don't think we'll be trespassing on the resources that should be allocated to others. What we are saying is that the sums that are allocated to us should actually be spent on us rather than returned.
Then just a quick follow-up.
Siobhan, I'm going to permit one more, and then we're going to give...
Just a follow-up to my initial question.
Sure.
Is there room for a model in Jamaica similar to how the Caribbean Court of Justice is operated, where it's seeded with a specific amount of money, and from that it then carries out its operations and becomes a self-financing body, rather than being, as I said earlier, tethered to the central government?
Well, yes, and what that would require, though, it's supposed to require maybe a constitutional amendment, maybe legislation, but yes, it can be done. And when you speak of the Caribbean Court of Justice, it is so far the only court in the world that I know of that is actually funded in that way. And so it provides reliability and stability of funding now from time to time because of shocks that may develop. For example, you may have a fall in the market. The capital fund may have to be topped up. But if you look at how pension funds, particularly the private pension funds in Jamaica, have been operating, we certainly have people here with the skill and with the competence to actually manage a trust fund. So I do not see anything out of the way with that kind of suggestion, and it is something worth considering. I think other persons have suggested something along similar lines. And again, having in place the accountability mechanisms, because for me, accounting for public funds has to be paramount, especially for a court system.
All right, thank you very much, Chief Justice. Again, technical folks, I'm just asking if we can see the President in one of our screens, please, as she's also fielding questions in this segment. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. Tana Thomas from Nationwide as well. I have two questions for Chief Justice Sykes. Number one is in relation to the Gun Court Act, Gun Court Matters, and media access.
Yes.
Now, the media isn't allowed in these matters, and
Yes.
the Act says that other than the persons listed,
Yes.
there must be authorization from the court for the
Yes.
media to have access. Is it time for an amendment that allows practitioners to sit in on these matters, or should discretion continue to rest with the courts? And number two, practitioners are wondering, Chief Justice Sykes, have you given any consideration to granting the media access to the sentencing for Julian Silvera?
Well, okay. Thank you very much. As far as the gun court is concerned, the court was established around 1976, also coming out of particular circumstances. And it was intended to be a fast-track court to deal with violent crimes involving the use of a firearm. And so when the court was established, it was the first court that eliminated the preliminary inquiries. Here went straight from police statements into a trial based upon the police statements, or statements recorded by the police officers. And so the thinking at the time was that witnesses and who participated in the proceedings would feel more confident to come forward to give evidence in circumstances where their identities would not be disclosed. So that was one of the thinking around the time. Now, that concern of the vulnerability of witnesses still remains and is reflected in a number of legislation since then. So there was a time when you had preliminary inquiries and you had to go before the judge, you gave the evidence, it was written down, read back to the witness and corrected and signed and so on. But the question of witnesses being injured or eliminated or threatened still remained. And so we now have evolved to the point now where police statements can now be put into evidence. So the point is that the concern has always been about the safety of witnesses, something that really hasn't decreased over time. Now, how you manage that process can be examined from time to time, maybe reporting in a manner that you don't give sufficient details to identify the witnesses and so on. But it was really to create an environment where the witnesses could come in and feel confident that they could give their evidence about the distressing things that they saw and observed without the reports that may, in a small society, allow people to identify who they are. So it is really trying to strike the balance between open justice and also the protection of vulnerable people such as the witnesses in these cases. So that is really what the thinking is. So that is the context in which the gun court was established. And incidentally, while open justice is a fundamental part of the accountability of the judiciary, a judge still has the discretion to perhaps clear a courtroom depending on the sensitivity of the matter, even in cases that are not designated as in-camera cases, because the judge ultimately must retain the discretion as to how the court operates. Now, in the normal course of things, a judge wouldn't make that decision lightly, but just to let you know it can happen. Now, regarding your immediate question now, regarding the Joyland Silvera case, yes, that will be a live stream sentencing. And why then? Because we are now at the point where it is just the sentencing that is left, and that process, it is easier to manage at this point than with the proceedings leading up to the entering of the plea of guilty.
Thank you.
And as far as the reform of the gun court legislation is concerned, I will leave that to the advocacy of the journalists and to the men and women sitting down at Gordon House and other interested parties. But it's something that I suppose we have to look at, because you have to revisit these things from time to time to see whether the concerns that were raised then when the gun court legislation came on stream still exist today. And if they still exist, can it be accommodated in another way? So, for example, you have the technology now that can disguise the voices of witnesses. You know, so you have technological solutions now that may be able to solve the problem.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Zara Burton, and I'm with 18 Degrees North. And it strikes me, I have several things to say, and I really hope that, given that this is a conversation and not just a presentation, that I would be allowed to be able to bring my concerns to the court. I have about 11 questions. I would like to first
Zara,
and foremost.
I'm going to take 2 and then take someone else. You can always
she
come
has
back.
7. So it would be probably better for me to do the 11 and then to take her 7. I asked her, right?
No, Zara. Let's do it this way. I'll be a little flexible. We'll take 3 from you. We'll allow someone else, and then, of course, you come back. But we'll get 3 or 11 this morning, just not all at once.
Okay.
All right? You have my commitment for that.
I will compromise.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. So, again, it strikes me that I've listened to all the presentations, and I think I heard from 2 heads about the issue of transparency. I noted that core values is not listing there transparency. And I found that the initiatives presented today, except, as I said, for the 2, and I would say the appeal court and the head of the parish courts, that the issue of transparency and how you are going to ensure more openness and more transparency and accessibility, which is one of your core values, accessibility. It is not something that was borne out, in my view, in your presentations as far as the press is concerned. You're more concerned with telling us what you're doing as you check your boxes of different achievements, and I think that it's admirable that you're clearing backlogs, that you're putting digital situations in place. All of that is admirable, okay? And I applaud the effort, okay, led by the Chief Justice. That being said, when it comes to my issues, which I have presented to the Chief Justice from last year, here it is, we're supposed to bring your concerns to the nation as the media, that you would want certain activities to be changed whereby you want to control your own funding. I understand that. But yet, my concerns, the concern that you guys have, is that you're not getting any response. I have concerns, and I've gotten 0 response from the Chief Justice regarding a letter I sent in June of 2025 related to access to documents by the press, including myself. I've brought it up repeatedly, and I've not even had the courtesy of a response from the Chief Justice, whether by letter or invitation, to have a meeting to discuss what is going on. So given that this is a conversation, I'm now bringing it again to the attention of the Chief Justice to ask about access to press documents, or to court documents, excuse me. If you go down to the civil court has a situation where I am competing with bearers who are dropping things off while I try to look through court documents with people at my head about the fact that I'm taking too long to look at court documents. The civil registry in particular is really painful because of the glut and the barrage of people that come to drop off documents. I was told that there was a system put in place whereby you could write a letter to the registrar via email and request to see documents as a journalist and sit and observe. I was then told after that the system had changed. Now, instead of writing the email that was never responded to, I now need to write a letter, which I wrote, and I have to drop it off at the central mailing area at the Supreme Court, which then takes its way to the registrar, and she will schedule a meeting. I've asked for 19 different court documents now from the FinSAC era, and this is now like last year, July. And I've been asking to see these documents. I was given an opportunity to see 4 of the 19, and up to now, I haven't gotten the rest. I've followed up, and the system is broken when it comes to accessing court documents. And that is my main concern of the 11, which is why I'm spending so much time on this. What are you doing as a court, whether it's the CAD division or the judiciary itself, on press access to court documents in a way that we can genuinely help to bring more accessibility and transparency to the population when it comes to court cases?
Chief Justice.
Go ahead, President.
I will just say this because she started with our presentation, or my presentation. And the Chief Justice, I leave him to answer that question because I suspect it's more directed to the operations of the Supreme Court, because such complaint cannot and will never be leveled against the Court of Appeal, because we have been very open in all that we do. We have a very competent, efficient, and courteous registrar who leads a team of persons who respond expeditiously to the public. So I suspect Miss I remember if Zara is the first name I can recall, could not be speaking about the Court of Appeal. But I will just say about the presentations that we were given a certain framework within which to present this morning. And I have about 50 pages that I could have read, but we didn't have the time to get into many things because the Court of Appeal also has its concerns. But when it comes on to the media, we do not interface with the media. I do not even think the media is so interested in what we do. So if you are interested in anything we do, we're open to your questions. We're open to you sharing your concerns. And I can guarantee that you will be given your response within a very short time, very promptly. And so your concerns clearly are legitimate. And I am sorry about them, but I'm sure they are not about the Court of Appeal.
I will
say that.
Hold on,
Justice Marvel.
I'm gonna
I just want to second that. I just want to say that the Court of Appeal is in fact a lot better on media issues that I've utilized. You think I may not have utilized it? I have utilized the Court of Appeal, and you're a lot better than the Supreme Court.
All right.
I'll leave that question to the Chief Justice. Thank you very much.
Chief.
Just to clear the record for my court.
Yes. Well, as far as the access to court records are concerned, a number depend upon the nature of the cases and so on. So when those letters come into me, I usually pass on to the registrar to resolve it in accordance with the rules that are there in the CPR. Now, there may be operational issues that can be resolved, so I have no difficulty with having the issues resolved, but I don't usually get directly involved with that. That is usually done through the registrar, and if there is a difficulty there, then I suspect that it can be resolved through dialogue. And as I say, it depends upon the nature of the cases and the type of information that is required. But generally speaking, it's open court. The documents are going to be referred to in open court when there is a trial and so on. So normally there shouldn't be a problem with getting the records.
So now that I'm telling you that I'm having a problem, I'm asking, and I've been asking since June of last year, since you have been complaining about lack of responsiveness, I know I'm complaining about lack of responsiveness, and since you are in a position to do something about this particular responsiveness, I am asking, what will happen on the responsiveness with the civil registrar?
You will deal with the registrar through that, not necessarily a meeting with me.
Okay, well, the civil registrar, I've already met with her, and she has not done anything. She says she has other things to take care of, and therefore that is not her priority.
And so I'll follow up with her with that to address it.
In relation to the documents that you need, Zara, we can have a conversation on those afterwards, and then we will set some timelines, some reasonable timelines within which we can see which of those documents you can in fact view and the time frame within which you can see them. All right?
Okay,
so we'll do
I
that.
will cede and come back.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Jamila Maitland from TVJ. Kadish, I hope I can be obliged. My editor left earlier, Milton, so I hope I can ask 3 questions in one round.
We'll take your 3 in one go, and then we'll allow someone else. And, of course, we'll finish your 7 before we leave.
Great. So for the Chief Justice, so this is from my editor. There are judges who hear cases but then proceed on retirement and sometimes fail to deliver judgments for cases that they hear. What can be done? Is it a legislation issue? Is it a sanction issue? That's his question for the Chief Justice. I'm not sure if this is in recent time, but he did pose that question. Do you want me to continue with the other two?
No, we'll allow Chief to respond and then.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that happened in the past. I don't think it has happened certainly within the last 3 to 4 years. In fact, there was a decision from the Court of Appeal that dealt with that. And so what we have done now internally is because there was a practice even at the Court of Appeal level where even if the judge went into retirement, then the judgment was not delivered, it could still be delivered, but the decision changed all of that. So that forced internal changes now, so you identify more clearly when the judge is about to retire. So we usually flag that from about 24 months out, and then the judge is gradually wound down to delivering all the outstanding judgments so that on the last day of work, all the decisions are actually delivered. So we haven't, at least I'm not aware of any recent as in the last 3 to 4 years because of that.
All right, thank you.
But if there's any, you could bring it to my attention and we'll deal with it.
All right. So 3 years after the Firearms Act came into effect, there have been some reports as it relates to how children, minors are treated under the Act. And you spoke briefly as it relates to the child diversion aspect of your presentation. I wanted to find out what are some trends that the court is seeing as it relates to minors being charged under the Firearms Act, and also, it may be too early, it's just 3 years in, but what suggestion do you have as it relates to ensuring that these minors are treated in a way that it fits the crime or the situation that they might have found themselves in as it relates to being charged under the Act? And I heard about the impact as it relates to Hurricane Melissa, but I wasn't sure if I heard any operational costs associated with it. Was there an assessment done as it relates to the number of courtrooms that were, courthouses damaged, records, computers, stuff like that? I didn't hear the cost associated.
The assessment was done? Yeah, it is being done now.
For that.
Yes. But in respect of the firearms, well, firearm offenses have always been treated as sort of unique and special in Jamaica. We have not seen any significant increase in the number of minors charged. So whenever those persons come before the court, then they are dealt with in accordance with what the Firearms Act says and also what the Child Care and Protection Act says as well, because the truth of the matter is that children can be prosecuted for a very serious crime. But the emphasis is more on rehabilitation and diverting them from the usual criminal process. So I don't know where are all the details of it, but that has been the general practice within the courts, so as not to criminalize the children at an early age.
And then the assessment. I didn't hear about the assessment.
It's going on in terms of the collection of the data for the damage to the buildings and so on. But that is, you're talking about the damage to the...
Any preliminary figures as it relates to the assessment?
Not yet, but certainly in the case of Westmoreland, as I said, from my uninformed position, to rehabilitate the main court, for example, would be in the vicinity of at least 150 to 200 million, because you're talking about a roof, you're talking about the electrical installation, putting in new computers, furniture, and so on. And also the same for the family court. And when you extend that to the court in Duncans and also the family court also in Trelawney, perhaps we're looking at roughly $400 million, $500 million, perhaps more. Yes.
I have a question here from online. This says there was a recent public education campaign surrounding jury trials. What is being done to better accommodate jurors who have to serve in what sometimes are, should this be derelict buildings? Mrs. Cameron Anglin, maybe you can take that one, ma'am.
Yes, I'll take that one. Thank you for the question. We have heard the cries of our jurors who have come to serve, and very intentionally we have looked at where they are accommodated and started to upgrade and retrofit those rooms that they serve in and the courtrooms. We have put in special accommodation in terms of facilities for meals for them as well, and transportation where we have issues for security that have arisen. And we have also provided the courts with extra resources to accommodate the jurors, because we recognize that over the years, with these buildings being in the state that they are, sometimes it's not a matter of repair, it's a matter of replacement. And so we have to be mindful, even as we put in the upgrades, how these upgrades are done. But we have had exit meetings for all our circuit sittings with our jurors, and the jurors have told us we have had evaluations done, and we take those assessments and evaluations and we are putting in the work to improve and enhance the resources for each court. So far, for this year, we have retrofitted 7 juror rooms across the island, and we'll be continuing to retrofit them until we have completed those, certainly at the Supreme Court and across the parish courts.
All right, thank you very much. I have some questions from CVM, but I'm going to take the next person at the microphone and then come back to those.
Morning. LeBaron Barrett, Gleaner. I have 2 questions for the Chief Justice. One, Chief Justice.
Mr. Barrett, come a little closer to the microphone.
Any better?
Thank you.
Okay. Chief Justice, I wonder if you are aware that journalists are being routinely asked, or we have been told that we have to get a judge's permission via court administration to get into a courtroom that is not hearing an in-camera case. And I wanted you to explain the basis on which we're being, we have to go through that process. That's one. And 2, there is a Supreme Court media protocol that, as I understand it, says that journalists are permitted to record for verification of their notes. I have had a case where my phone that I used to record was taken by a clerk and the recording deleted because that clerk said to me, I am not permitted to record in court. In the parish court last week, a police officer instructed me to get off my phone because the phone is not permitted in a courtroom. I want you, Chief Justice, to just clarify once and for all, what is the intent of the court's media policy so that we are all in one place in terms of understanding what it is that we are permitted to do.
Well, the media policy speaks for itself. That may be a question now of further dissemination and education of all the stakeholders, including the police officers, the judges, and so on. But the media policy is what governs the relationship between the courts or the judiciary and the media. And so it's a question of reinforcement and addressing it when complaints that you have raised here are raised, and we have to do that introspection and to ensure that the media policy is known and applied consistently across all of our courts. So that policy is in place, and it will remain in place until it is changed.
I didn't hear you on the first question of journalists being asked to get permission first.
Well, but that is not in the media policy.
No, that's a different.
Right, I don't know about that. So as a thought, I'm saying now that if we have to ensure that we are acting in accordance with the media policy. So if what you have said is correct, then that is not in accordance with the media policy. So that would have to be corrected.
Garfield Angus, Jamaica Information Service. To the Chief Justice, those long-running trials, if I can call them that, such as the gang trials, and in particular the 2014, the entertainer Mr. Palmer trial. Are there considerations to publish the cost of these trials?
No, I haven't thought about publishing the cost of the trial, but it is, I suppose, information that could be gathered together. But yes, they tend to be costly at times, depending on, for example, if there are persons who are represented on legal aid and so on. So they tend to cost a fair amount of money, but we are not yet in the habit of costing particular trials, but I suppose it's something that we could do to get an idea as to how much it costs to run particular types of trials.
I have a question here from Nika Lewis at CVM. President, I think this one is for you. AI in justice, since you spoke about that earlier, with global courts experimenting with AI in case management and legal research, what role do you see for AI in our courts, and how can it be integrated without undermining judicial independence or due process?
Thank you. Sorry for the pause. I have to click on my neck. Let me just start by saying all of us are, well, I cannot speak for everyone, but here at the Court of Appeal, we are more on an experimental journey right now with AI, guided by the Judiciary's AI policy, which we are trying to get ourselves familiar with. But based on my, what I should call parochial exposure to AI, the use of AI, we see AI as an opportunity that we can exploit for better preparation of our judgments. And I have experimented with those that have been approved, like the ChatGPT, bearing in mind that, and the AI tool will let you know that it is not necessarily accurate. So how we find ourselves doing it when we using, rather, the AI tools, when we get like the submissions from counsel, I find that you can use the AI tools to summarize those submissions. You can ask for the major points to be highlighted for you, or you can even venture into saying if there's an authority out there. But what we do so with caution, knowing that there is the danger of being given authorities that do not exist. So we have the obligation to, and the duty to make sure we verify everything that we we get from AI. What we do, what I would not encourage, and the policy does not encourage, is to use AI to draft our judgments, because really and truly it ought to be the output of the judicial mind and the judicial brain in the end. So I've never ventured, and I have to speak personally because it's not an established platform or an established procedure or process in our courts. What we would do, we can always ask it to help us to refine or restructure what we have, but knowing that at base the information there is ours. So the fairness is not compromised. The analysis of the law and application of the law to the facts would not be compromised in any way, and so the integrity of our judicial reasoning process would be preserved. At the courts, especially the Court of Appeal, as I always say, we are in the publishing business. Our decisions are usually, invariably, the final decisions on most of the appeals coming from the lower courts, and therefore everything we do has to be subjected to, has to be reduced to writing. Even when we say we deliver oral judgments, they are reduced to writing to guide those who rely on our decisions. So editing is a major component of our duty and our work at the Court of Appeal, because we have to ensure that there's dignity in what we send out, and accuracy is part of the dignity. So AI tools do assist us in that process, I must admit, and it goes a far way in helping us to expedite the process, in helping us to send out judgments that have that editorial integrity. And it is an error because we do not have editors like you do in the media. We have to rely on our own knowledge, which is not so expansive, I must confess, because as lawyers, we were not really trained in many areas. So AI has its value, and it is a matter of exploiting that as part of the opportunity to make our work better and our reach much further. So I don't know if that assists in any way the question, the person who asked the question.
Thank you very much, President. This one I think is for you, Chief Justice. This is also from Nika Lewis. This is in relation to arbitration expansion. Given the judiciary's push to reduce case backlogs, how do you envision arbitration and other alternative dispute resolution mechanisms reshaping Jamaica's justice system, and what safeguards are needed to ensure accessibility and fairness?
Well, I don't see it as alternatives. I think the modern word now is appropriate dispute resolution, because the trial method is one method. Arbitration, it is a trial, but it's done privately. But there are now mediation, have international mediation represented now, captured in the Singapore Convention. So the point is that as time has gone on, you have various means of resolving disputes, particularly commercial disputes. We are part of the International Judicial Dispute Resolution Network, and what that does is that it seeks to develop the judge-led resolution of disputes without a trial. And this is particularly beneficial to business people generally, to citizens generally, because litigation is expensive. You have the cost of retaining lawyers, and you also have the cost in terms of lost time that you invest in the case when you could be earning. So what has been spoken about globally is where the judges now can use their experience and wisdom to manage the case in a manner that you bring it to a satisfactory end. When I say satisfactory, that is acceptable to both parties or all the parties involved without necessarily going the full route of a trial. Now, the safeguards, well, in terms of just, certainly for the courts, you have certain rules by which you operate by. In terms of arbitration, that is really a private arrangement where essentially the persons create their own tribunals, and then you have the legislative component that allows you to enforce the arbitration outcome as a judgment of the court once you can get it registered. Then you have mediation that allows parties to resolve the disputes themselves, and with that, it can come back to court and be recorded as if it's a judgment of the court. So it's essentially a multi-door way of resolving disputes, and it is being encouraged, and certainly I encourage it because it, one, reduces the load on the courts, and the importance of mediation is that it still maintains a high degree of agency where the parties actually shape the outcome for themselves, whereas in the context of a trial or even arbitration, you are dependent upon the analysis of a judge after the evidence is presented. So I would encourage persons to take advantage of all the avenues that are available. And if you can resolve it without formal court processes, then by all means do so.
Thank you very much, Chief Justice. Who's next at the microphone? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I am back. Zara Burton, 18 Degrees North. I want to continue on about the access and the being blocked from different court actions. Last year, when I wrote in June of 2025, which incidentally was a follow-up to a previous email, I was at a seminar in New Orleans on judiciary access for media access to judiciary matters. One of the things that they mentioned in that particular setting was that journalists in the United States can in fact file a motion to object to a closed court proceeding and/or sealed court documents. Do we in our jurisdiction have a mechanism to be able to do that? And if not, would you support a mechanism that if in fact something is in the public interest and the public interest outweighs necessarily the privacy of these individuals in the opinion of the public, that this is something that could be facilitated?
Well, it has to be carefully thought out, because I imagine that would be a formal court process.
So there's no mechanism currently?
No, there's no mechanism if you want to come to court to argue that point, because in terms of access to information, there is access to information in terms of open justice, but in terms of what you're talking about there, where the media can file and so on, I suspect that would have to be a judicial process, because it is not just the media, because there are other persons who may be involved as well. So the affected parties may wish to make submissions on the point as well. So that's why I say it would have to be a formal hearing. So you hear from the other parties who may be affected, because even now when you talk about media access, take the Epstein files, you have persons, lawyers who are representing persons who are said to be the victims of the Epstein files are actually saying that some of the disclosure that was made was done inappropriately, because it is now reflecting and giving information about persons who should be protected. And that is why I say that it ought to be a formal court process where it comes before a judge, where the contesting parties can put their arguments in a controlled environment and a decision made, and then you go through the process of you disagree with the judge and you go to the Court of Appeal or to the Privy Council, as the case may be, but it shouldn't be just between the journalist and the court, because a case is always about affected parties, so the affected parties should have the opportunity to present their point of view. They may agree with you, they may not.
Exactly, and so the question then becomes, can we have that mechanism put in place?
But you can apply to court just like any other matter and apply for it and have it resolved. That's what I'm saying. There's nothing to prevent you from doing that.
Okay, so even now...
Yes.
Go ahead, President.
Moderator, may I just come in here? Because it seems to be a broad concern of Ms. Burton, it is. And the Chief Justice is correct, but the first thing you have to ascertain, Ms. Burton, would be whether you have a justifiable ground for complaint within some statutory framework or legislative framework. And I suspect, based on where you're going, you seem to be saying that there is a limitation on it, on the right to just open justice and accessibility to information and all that. So you would have to get legal advice as to whether there's a justiciable ground for bringing some complaint. There's no mechanism outside of the general law. And I don't want to be here as a legal advisor. But let us say, for instance, you believe, or is a class, a group where you believe that your constitutional rights are being infringed by virtue of your exclusion from a court hearing. You would have to look if that is an infringement of the rights of the freedom of the press. So then you would have to say to yourself, let us bring an action then in the courts, through the constitutional courts, for the court now to determine whether there is a good reason and lawful reason for your exclusion. So I don't want you to go away here believing that there's no mechanism for anything to be tested within the courts. But you would have to put it within a framework, and I suspect the framework would have to be that of the Constitution, because I doubt you can find a private law remedy in that regard. So I would just come in to say that it would have to come from that perspective, because it's the Constitution that speaks to the notion of open justice by virtue of its provisions, that all hearings are to be in public unless there are reasons for it to be closed. And then the court will look to see whether exclusion is reasonably justified in a free and democratic society. So that's where it's at.
Okay.
Thank you very much, President.
Thank you for that. On the issue of media policy, I know that I've been very appreciative of the fact that the Chief Justice has put that in place. However, it is not working well. As you can see from Laverne's different questions, it is a situation where either the media protocol persons are not properly trained, or it's a situation where sometimes even when you seek audience, I know I've written to Mrs. Cameron Anglin before and gotten no redress in terms of the fact that I'm not getting the right information. I've been told by one media officer that I can't get any information because a court matter is in progress rather than concluded. And that is not correct. And you ask for some kind of redress, and CAD is silent. And we're supposed to just hug it up and, of course, accentuate your issues while we suffer. So I want to understand, why is the CAD silent when you have complaints about media protocol issues like what Laverne is just now saying he has? What is being done to properly train the people serving us?
Well, I can address that in the way that the Chief Justice has now committed to. And what he's saying is that we will go back into the field and do the training. But I have intervened personally for journalists who have reached out on matters that they would want to attend to. We have a media liaison officer in the form of Mrs. Jared Fletcher, and I'm certain, and I have been told that when you have reached out to her, she has made it her duty to reach out to the courts to determine whether or not these are matters that you can access and that you can be in. We have to also pay due regard to the discretion of the judge and also the parties that are involved, because the policy also speaks to that. While there is access, there also has to be balance where there are other issues, attendant issues, that may be occurring within the trial or within the court proceedings that will require us to adopt a different approach, some of which we may not be in a position to disclose in the course of the trial, but we'll be in a position to explain to you when it is through. So we have been responding, and we will commit to doing so, and we will commit to training and educating our frontline officers with responsibility for the implementation and execution of the media policy. But I always caution journalists, as a former journalist myself, that it is very important for us to understand, or for you to understand, that not because you have this right of access, it means that it will trump everything else that happens within a court proceeding. And so far, I must say that our journalists in Jamaica, you have been very responsible with how you have applied for access and how you have utilized the media protocol. So I believe from here on, what remains for us to do is to strengthen our communication channels in respect of our journalists and be able to provide, where possible, the access and train our teams to know how to decipher when access must be granted and when access will need to be escalated to be considered at a different level. So that is my commitment to you. We can strengthen that, and where you have difficulties, Laverne can tell you when he has a difficulty, he reaches me whenever he needs to find me, and I'm accessible.
I'm not so successful, just for
and
the record.
And also keep in mind too that ultimately the judge on the day in question presiding is going to have the final say, have the policy as a guideline, but the judge ultimately has the final say depending on the dynamics that is happening on the ground. So that the judge must have retained that authority. And so far as they've been able to determine, most of the judges have allowed coverage of cases. So the judges are aware of the concept of open justice, but there may very well be time, maybe extreme circumstances, but the judge must retain that authority.
It's not just about the judge, as I said to you before. It is a general situation, even at the parish courts. So I wonder if you could even address perhaps...
What general situation are you talking about?
Okay, so you'll go into a halfway tree court, and you'll simply ask a basic question.
Such as?
Who is the attorney representing this accused? Basic.
And you can't get that information?
You can't get the information. Right?
I
and it is
know.
ridiculous.
I'm not.
It is something where you have to now call in. I had to go through a process, let us say, of calling somebody who is in charge, and then that person who is in charge said that they had to find the media liaison officer to help me out. And of course, that took a couple of days and whatnot. Eventually, I got the information. But the long story short, it's a general thing. You called on Churlana the other day to verify, was this person convicted? I can't answer that. It has to be routed through the media liaison officer, which Kadish definitely got back to me on that particular front. But what I'm trying to say is there is a general hesitancy by the people in the front line to help media with information in a way that is deadline driven. We are left to a situation we have to check.
So the issue then is the time.
It's not just the time, it's the hesitancy to help media.
Oh, well, okay.
And it needs to change.
Yeah, well, we can have a debate about that, but the point is, there is a media policy. So I understand that you may want to meet a particular deadline by a particular time. I get that. But what we also want to do is not to create a culture in which persons can simply call the courts, and because you will have persons who may try to extract information from the staff that may not necessarily be appropriate, because that can happen and maybe has happened. So what you're talking about is really the timeliness of the information.
No, not just the timeliness, the hesitancy.
As I said, we can go back and forth, but that hesitancy comes out of the policy, and so we tend to have a structure through which the information is given. So what you're saying isn't really the absence of information, but it's the time at which it comes, because I understand that
also the hesitancy.
Well, allow me to speak, please.
Yeah.
You have the hesitancy is part of the process, because we have a structure. So from as you have gone on, as I said, it's not the absence of information, it's the timeliness of the information, and the hesitancy affects the timeliness. And that we can have a debate about. But I thought you were saying that there was a general lack of access to information. But that really isn't the case. What you're really saying is you want particular types of information in a particular time frame to meet your reporting deadline, which I understand, and that's fine. So that is something we can talk about, but we are not going to open it up in such a manner that anyone can simply call a court office and simply say, I need information about so and so.
But when you say we'll talk about it,
there has to be a structure.
Is it something that you will...
Hold on, Ms. Burton.
Allow me to speak. There has to be a structure so that we can have a debate about. But what you want isn't going to happen in the absence of further dialogue and so on. And we see how best it can be managed.
I have other questions, but I'm going to cede.
I think from this conversation, Ms. Burton, what we'll commit to doing is to strengthening our internal communications in relation to impacting and positively impacting the timeliness within which you can get your information. But I want you to also, and our colleagues in the media, to understand that sometimes the information that you are asking for, it requires the person who is required to verify that information is oftentimes in court. And so sometimes when you call, you may have to wait until after court for the information to come. Sometimes the file is in court.
Sometimes it shouldn't be.
No, but
that
you
the
have
person
to,
is in court. The person should be admin to be able to give us the information.
No, we don't have. If you understand the structure of the courts, they're not staff members who are in court, who are at the court office, who are just waiting for that. The court is a legal place. These are persons who work inside the courtroom. So that is why we have the structure at the CAD. So we're saying we will strengthen those structures and hope to improve the time within which you can get your information. And that's our commitment to you, and to ensuring that we have some amount of resensitization on the media policy to ensure that our internal stakeholders are aware of it and how to apply it. All right? Jamila?
Jamila again from TVJ. So my question is to the head of the parish court. I know the assessments are currently being done, especially as it relates to Western Jamaica. I wanted to find out the 9 courts that are on the coast, whether any consideration or any discussion is being had for a possible relocation of any one of these courts, or perhaps all of them. And 2, so recently I visited the parish court, the traffic court on Melbourne Road. Unfortunately, I wasn't covering any reports. I actually appeared before Judge Mitzi.
You did?
Yeah, I did, right? All right.
And they got the maximum fine?
You know what? I plead the fifth on that one. And, I thought to myself, I know Chief Justice said the court wasn't there it's not a revenue agency, but I wondered, sometimes it's very frustrating, especially at the traffic court on Melbourne Road. And I went after May, and I following your presentation, I think you said there were some implementations of some stuff following me, and I went in August or so. And, I was begging them, I was on the job, and I thought I had to go back to work. So, of course, I used a media card. I told them that. I'm begging you, please, give me a little blind. It so happened that I got through a little quicker than most persons, and I heard that this blueprint now is possibly going to be used at some parish courts. I'm not sure what extent of the blueprint that is being used at traffic court. So I wanted to find out to what extent is it working, because people see it as a way of, I've learned my lesson. I'm not going back there unless I'm covering a story, but I thought, how are the measures being appreciated there by the public and even by, the judges there and the staff there as well?
All right, so we're going to start with Chief Judge Broderick, and then we'll come to you, Judge Beaumont-Daly.
Okay, as the Chief Justice would have said earlier, as it concerns major infrastructural considerations, that is really not within the remit. And of course, we are invited on occasion to have discussions along with those that, for want of better phraseology, hold the purse strings. And so to that extent, other than what you perhaps would be aware of in the media, as it concerns the inevitable relocation of the Black River, the courthouse in Black River, I am not aware specifically of any intention to move any other court or relocate any other court. If I might just attempt to treat with the issue of the assigning matters times. As you can imagine, time slots. As you can imagine, when you consider a traffic ticket, it only becomes a court matter if a person fails to pay. So it will be difficult to implement a time slot for an individual in those circumstances. The strategy that we have now employed with respect to matters that were, for which warrants would have been issued or have fallen from the list, and those matters being relisted, gives us more control. And that allows us to then specify to persons as they come to us to give them a time slot. And that, of course, will assist greatly. But, of course, what is sad and is really to be informed by that is the fact that we would much prefer that persons don't commit traffic violations. And we would much prefer that individuals who know that they have no basis to challenge, because the Chief has already pointed out that an individual is permitted to challenge if in an appropriate case, but if you know that you have no basis to challenge it, you're best advised to pay the fine at the tax office, because policy directions from us really would inform that if you fail to pay the fine at the tax office, then perhaps you should be visited with a higher penalty should you insist on the court be so engaged. But that's what I would volunteer to say at this time.
Judge Beaumont-Daly, in terms of the strategies.
Yes, thanks, Ms. Maitland. So just before I answer that, I just want to indicate to you that normally when matters come to the traffic court, so we are not in a position to set the number of matters that come before us. And so it is the number of matters that are issued by the police, and it is registered in the TIM system, and then we would address it. So on any given day, we wouldn't know whether it is 100, 1,000, 10,000, or otherwise, unless it is that we are printing the court sheets, preparing for court, and so on. Another thing is that we are not sure how many persons would turn up on any given day. And so we're not even in a position to say, okay, all right, we're going to address this in that court or that court because 100 will turn up, or we're going to put certain measures in place because of that. But what we were able to do where our strategy is concerned is really to segment, to have a system in place where we can place different cases in different groups so that we can have the matters dealt with in a quicker manner. It's unfortunate that when you came, you were not able to be dealt with as quickly as you wished and you had to play the media card to go in. I'm sorry about that. However, what we have been doing so far, and it has been working based on what I've been hearing, even from the persons, the court users, because from time to time, we have our suggestion boxes outside, and we also engage with the public from time to time. And we would have heard that, yes, it is working, and in fact, there is a marked improvement. Even the attorneys have indicated there is a marked improvement from what existed before. Because what existed before were two overburdened courts, just dealing with all the traffic matters, all the ticketable matters. And these are thousands of matters that come before the court. Yes, many people sometimes may not show up, but there may be times, and there have been times, when many have shown up. There was even one occasion where we had 6,000 new matters listed before the court, and that is just tickets. We're not talking about transport authority matters. We're not talking about the matters that come in by information. And so it's a day-to-day assessment for us. And I'm hoping that with this strategy, I've seen the difference, and I'm hoping that you can see the difference further on. But of course, we're not encouraging you to commit any traffic violations.
And just to piggyback on that, the strategies at the traffic court will this year result in the traffic court being backlog free. That's the traffic court in Kingston will be backlog free in this year because of those strategies that have been implemented to treat with those matters before the courts. And you would have heard about the traffic ticket public day that is happening at the St. Catherine Parish Court. That is going to be replicated as a strategy to address the backlog of traffic ticket matters that are before the other parish courts across the island. And also to indicate that much of the backlog that is left within the parish court system is in relation to these traffic tickets. So we are taking these deliberate steps to address those matters before the courts. Siobhan, you're back at the microphone.
Good. It's still morning. Good morning again. I have a question relating to a very controversial topic, and I want to make sure I frame it in such a way that it does not interfere with the notion of separation of powers, but it does speak specifically to the matter of separation of powers between the judiciary and the executive. And it's in relation to interpretations, or rather rulings on interpretations of the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms and the Constitution. the judiciary has been accused in the past, and quite recent as well, of essentially overreaching in their judgments in relation to the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms, almost to the realm of activism. And I would like to pick your brain, Chief Justice, as to how do you see the judiciary's role in terms of the interpretation of that charter?
Well, that is really one of the fundamental roles of the judiciary, because remember, with the separation of powers, the executive, cabinet, they make the policy. The Prime Minister and the cabinet can't make law. They have to come into the houses of Parliament, the House of Representatives and the Senate, to create the law, to have the law passed and then signed by the Governor General. So that is done. The judges are not involved in either policy or the lawmaking process in terms of the formal enactment of the law. But somebody has to determine what the laws mean. And that is where the judges come in. And so the cases usually start in the Constitutional Court, if that is a direct constitutional challenge, or it can arise in the context of the Court of Appeal has done in the context of criminal and even civil cases where, as the case progresses, there might be a point about the Constitution that arises. And so that is really one of the cornerstone responsibility of the judges of the judiciary, because one of the oaths that the judges take at King's House is to uphold the Constitution. So to the extent that there is a dispute between parties, then the judges can't take a pass and say, oh, I'm going to leave that for the politicians. It has come up, so the judge has to address it. So I do not know about this point about activism, but there are principles that apply to constitutional interpretation. So, for example, you hear about the living document, that is not a static document, and so the Constitution is to be, the rights are to be given the broadest liberal interpretation, provided that the words used can carry that interpretation. So the judge does not go home and look to the heavens for inspiration. There are principles that guide the deliberation of the judges as they approach the whole question of interpretation. And so when it comes to rights and so on, yes, persons may disagree with the interpretation of it, but again, checks and balances. So if the judges come up with an interpretation that some persons find disagreeable, then the parliamentarians can go back and change the law if they so feel, using the constitutional route, of course. So that is how the dialogue goes back and forth. An example of that is with the Pratt and Morgan decision, when the Privy Council essentially had decided that after, I think it was 5 years or 7 years, I can't remember the exact time now, that the death penalty could hardly be imposed. But there's a provision in the Charter that speaks to the possibility of imposing the death penalty, notwithstanding that that time has passed. So that is how it works. So Parliament passes the laws, the judges interpret. If Parliament disagrees, then they can change the law. And there's an appellate process as well. So if persons say, so even within the process, if the state is involved and they disagree, they go to the Court of Appeal. And if they disagree with the Court of Appeal, then they go on to the Privy Council.
But in the cases, for example, where they say, well, that was clearly not the intent of the legislators when we passed this law, why is it being interpreted in such a manner? How do you address a concern like that?
No, well, oftentimes when you might read even in the judgments, I suppose we are guilty of using infelicitous language when we say that we are trying to determine the intention of the legislature. It's not that the judge is trying to find out what MPA thought, what Member of Parliament thought. It is really looking at the text itself. So that's where the judge has to start. The judge has to start with the text. So when the judge speaks about the intention of Parliament, what the judge is really saying is that here is a bill that on the face of it has been legitimately passed. What does the text mean? So in that sense, you are trying to determine what this body of writing means, because somebody must have intended to convey some idea. So you usually start out with the literal rule. You take the words as they come. Does it lead to an absurd result? Those kinds of things. So there are principles that are applied to the interpretation of the text. And then now the text has to be put within the broader context. So you might have let's just say, Section 17(1) of the Charter of Rights. But that text might have to be looked at in the light of other provisions within the same charter that can give you a sense of what is the appropriate interpretation to be given to the words. It is not, let's say, a simple process that you just look at the words, you read them, and then you go away. That there are principles that are applied, so you look at the text and the text within its context, and applying the principles of statutory interpretation. And then when it comes to the Constitution now, there are special rules applying to constitutional interpretation, particularly when it comes to the rights of citizens, since the idea is if a right is conferred, then the right, so far as the language can accommodate it, the right should be given a liberal and generous interpretation. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, I'm back. I'm Zara Burton with 18 Degrees North with my last set of questions.
Okay.
Now, in September of 2025, there was a case that was filed in the civil court, and it was not yet uploaded to the system in January when I checked back. And the lady who was attending to me said, it's just not yet uploaded to the system. So I couldn't report accurately about what the nature of the complaint was. How long is it supposed to take once a complaint is filed in the Supreme Court to be uploaded to the system?
I'm not getting you. I'm not getting you at all.
Okay, a lawyer files an action on behalf of an individual at the Supreme Court in the civil registry. How long does it take for the representative who assists persons like myself at the counter to be able to see on her system what the nature of the complaint is? There was a case in September filed, but the physical copy had not been scanned to be uploaded to the electronic system. How long does it take for a paper complaint to be uploaded to the system via scan?
As far as I'm aware, it should be the process involved is that when it comes in, it is vetted by the staff, and then it goes through the process of being numbered and so on, and then it is uploaded. Now, there were particular inefficiencies within the civil registry, which we have attempted to rectify in terms of changing the structure of the registry, but usually that should be done within a matter of days. And because of the inefficiencies there, we had persons who were actually responsible for working in the civil registry also going into court. That has now been rectified by having a new structure that has been approved by the Ministry of Finance that we are supposed to be implementing this year. And so after this year, that shouldn't really be a significant problem, because we have now essentially created three groups of persons: those who will always be in the registry, those who go to court, yes, and those who will serve members of the public. So broadly speaking, those will be those three groups, and also as we improve our scanning and electrical uploading capabilities. So that was an issue there which we are actually resolving now through changing the internal staffing structure and implementing the structure. So as time goes on, that shouldn't really be a problem. In terms of the time standard, that will be worked out now when we have the new structure in place and we see how it works. So that was possibly the result of the internal weaknesses there, which we have addressed structurally.
The new structure is to be implemented for April 1? April 1.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
Also, in terms of digital structuring, in the United States, you referred to a matter of New York Times earlier in your presentation. There is a system called PACER, where documents in different cases can be uploaded and can be accessed. I do that as an investigative reporter. I go online to PACER. I am able to put in the court I want, the case, the number of the name, and the documents come up. Instead of that being, something down the line, is that something that could maybe be pushed up so that we don't, even media practitioners, general public, lawyers, can just have a system in place where you don't have to go down to the Supreme Court. You can see all the documents just scanned in one place. You put it there. Whatever we're able to access, we can access based on who we are. And it's a very efficient process.
Well,
why can't we get that?
Well, again, I do not think necessarily what happens in the United States is necessarily commendable. What I can say to you is that because courts operate in a cultural context. So what I will say to you is that we are devising solutions suitable for our cultural context. Part of that now involves what we call an integrated electronic case management system, which the contract was signed in September of last year. So that is going to be part of improving access to documents from the courts. And so as we go along, we'll see how it develops in our cultural and legal context, because law is not a monolithic thing. Law comes and evolves out of people's culture. So we'll see how it develops here. So I can promise you that we'll replicate what happens in the United States, because I am not of the view that everything that happens in the United States is necessarily good or bad. So it has to be evaluated to see whether it is appropriate for us. But certainly in terms of the general point about access, it's a principle that we operate by in terms of open justice. But as to the mechanics of it, we'll see how it operates as we go along.
Okay, another issue of sketches. When you go to, again, in the United States, I had the experience, and I see it still going on, where you go to court and you're able to hire an artist to sketch the accused or the proceeding or the judge or whoever in the whole thing. My question is, can we employ artists now, let us say, for instance, to cover different trials and take them with us into the court?
Again, cultural context. Cultural context. Like you keep referring to the United States, because there are some things, for example, that, as I say, may very well happen there that we will have to look at as it unfolds here. So for example, they don't, in some of their court, like the U.S. Supreme Court, they don't allow the cameras in, for example. It's an audio. Our Court of Appeal allowed both audio and video last year when they were doing the Cecil Moore case. So that's what I'm trying to point out here, that not because it happens in the United States, it necessarily means that it is good. It's cultural context, and we're talking about the concept of open justice and how it operates here. So the question of an artist, that would have to be thought about and considered.
So if we want to bring an artist, what do we do for future, like, for
I
instance,
do not think it would be allowed for the time being.
Why not?
Because it, again, is not a part of our practice and something that we can discuss.
Barred it. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah. But the Criminal Justice Administration Act bars that.
Yes.
So you'd have to go to Parliament, and then they'll have to look at the social context and determine whether it's time for a change.
What does it say? Why do you say it's barred? I don't understand.
The statute, the law bars it, so we'd have to get the specific section. The statute bars the use of
administration. It's one of the provisions that come
bars the use of what? Sorry.
Taking images and pictures and so on of defendants, because even though it is published
pictures, I understand pictures, but it doesn't say anything about sketches.
Images.
Well, you check. I'm sure it does.
Well, I would like to ask if it doesn't say anything about images, right? If we can take in, we're not asking about pictures, we're asking about sketches.
Again, I can't give you that comment because you're not the only person involved. The defendant may have an objection to it. I don't know. I can't sit here and tell you we are going to do this or do that. The defendant is represented by a lawyer. The lawyer has to be heard as to whether he would agree with something like that. It involves the legal profession. It is not just about journalists. There are other persons in the society as well who should have a say. So that's why I say it is something that we can discuss. But I can't give you a commitment and say we are going to be doing this and doing that, because we have to hear from other stakeholders. You are just one, an important one, but not the only one. And the United States, they have resolved their issues in a particular way. We have to resolve our issues in our way.
So when you say that we have to talk about it, if it is that we want to do this, What is it that we need to do in order to get it done?
Well, as the President has indicated, I'm certain that there's legislation there that speaks to it, so you have to look at it. No, I can't give you this no right here as I said. You'd have to look at the legislation.
We have to take a closer look at the Criminal Justice Administration Act.
And to see what
the provision says.
What the provision says, and even if assuming that there was no provision, the person has an attorney at law. What if the person objects? Shouldn't he be heard? Shouldn't she be heard? You might want to take a sketch of the judge. Shouldn't the judge be heard? The judge may have concerns. I don't know. What about jurors? They have concerns too. So persons who may have concerns should be heard in the same way that you are heard, and you have a discussion about it. You can create a forum, and you have a discussion, and perhaps out of that comes a position paper, maybe legislation, maybe a policy. Just like with the media policy that we have, it is there, and as you go along, as Mr. Barrett has brought it to my attention now about what is happening, which really shouldn't be happening, so it points out to us that we need now to strengthen the internal communication, and maybe it has to be an ongoing exercise since you have fluctuating members of the court. You might have persons who leave, so it may be something that we have to embed in our operations. Is it that we do it twice a year? Is it that we do it once a year? Whatever is necessary, then we have to take the concern on board and ensure that the media policy is known. And as it goes along, out of fora like these, then we have the dialogue and the discussion. But I can't give you a commitment to say this is going to happen or that is going to happen.
President.
Yes, President.
She can look at Section 33 of the Criminal Justice Admin Act. It speaks to no person shall take or attempt to take any photograph or with a view to publication, make or attempt to make in any court any portrait or sketch of any prisoner or publish any photograph, portrait or sketch taken or made. So I'm just saying that some things are legislative rather than just a policy of the court. So it is a matter of Parliament.
Yes, it does. We did consider it when we were developing the media policy, and we came across the provision in the Act, which is why we did not include it in the media policy.
And what I'm saying is that even if there was no legislation,
right.
even if there was no legislation, we would still have to engage the members of the bar. Would you feel comfortable with this? You have to, the defendants, I suspect, in a criminal trial are perhaps the most important, other than the witnesses, the most important, because that is the person that the trial is all about. He may have legitimate concerns. I don't know. So I can't sit here and pretend I have universal wisdom. I don't. So that's why I say we have to hear from different stakeholders. They may bring perspectives that perhaps we never even thought about.
Okay.
All right. Yes.
I'm winding down. It's just two more. Divorce documents, excuse me. On the issue of hesitancy, when you go to the divorce marriage area and ask the question, is this person divorced from that person? You get blank. And they say that that information is not allowed. One time I remember protesting it, and eventually it was a couple from the 70s that they got divorced. I eventually got, yes, they're divorced. I was doing research for a company that had hired me out of Latin America. Now, the issue of divorce, over at the RGD, you can know who is married based on marriage certificates. You can get that ordered as a journalist. I'm not asking for the salacious details, but it is imperative to understand who is married to who, or if the marriage is no more, we need to know the marriage is no more so we understand how to write as journalists. Why is there a hesitancy? Again, I got it in one case, but why is there a general hesitancy to know if a marriage is now dissolved? We can know if it's gone together. Why is it we can't know if it's dissolved?
As I said before, when it comes to the communication, there's a process by which we communicate. You want to go directly to the person at the office. And I understand that, but the point is we have set in place a mechanism to control the flow of information. There's a process by which you get the information.
And what is that process, please? Because I keep misunderstanding what that process is. I try so hard to understand the process.
The media process tells you that as to how to get the information. The media protocol tells you how to get the information. That's why I said that your concern isn't really information, but the time and speed at which it comes. As I said, something we can have a debate about that. But what I gather from is that what you're talking about, you might want, because it's time sensitive, and I appreciate that journalists need information timely in order to make your report. But it's just that in our cultural context, we prefer to have a structured way, particularly when you are operating in now the Data Protection Act on all of its implications and so on. So what we don't want is to create a culture in the minds of our staff that they can simply just speak about information with anybody at any time. So,
no, but
Ms. Burton, hold on, Ms. Burton.
So all of that will have to be looked at, and again, we can be reviewed and refined. But the structure, while it may take long, but I prefer to err on the side of caution than end up at the end of a criminal prosecution for the courts, because we have to look through the implication now of the Data Protection Act in that context, because you have the Constitution, you have access to information, you now have the Data Protection Act, and the people who are litigants in the courts, they have rights as well. So what is the implication of the Data Protection Act on that? We are still thinking it through, and as we implement and so on, we may find that it makes life easier, it may make it more difficult, but we can't ignore the fact that we are in the era of the Data Protection Act, and the Act speaks to data subjects, and data subjects have the right to ask institutions, how are you using our information? So there are implications there that we have to think through carefully. So I prefer to err on the side of thinking through carefully rather than just granting access just so. So we'll have to agree to disagree on that, but as I say, it can be an ongoing dialogue. So we have to think through how all of this affects our operations, because the courts hold a lot of data about persons. And it would be a remarkable thing if persons could just simply call a court just about anybody and get information about anything about anybody.
That's
so
correct.
Thank you very much,
in
terms
Chief
of
Justice. Ms. Burton,
whether we can get divorce information. That's what I want to know. What is the
you cannot.
We have to think. I can't give you that
cannot.
answer.
That's what you're saying.
You cannot just get that information just like that, Ms. Burton. Some of this information is protected under the Data Protection Act, and we have to respect the rights of the parties. So you cannot just get that information just off the bat.
So there's a process.
Even if you go through the process, what I'm still asking is, even with the Data Protection Act, can somebody know whether somebody is divorced? I mean, I think that's just a general question.
It's a privacy matter, Ms. Burton.
I suppose ultimately you can know, but there's a process to get there.
Okay, we can know, but there's a process.
I suppose ultimately you will know, but there's a process to get there.
Okay, that's what I'm asking. Okay.
All right, Ms. Burton, how many of your questions are left? Because we need to wrap this morning's session.
I have maybe one more. Mm-hmm. Okay, if that's okay.
That's the.
All right. The well, this was an outstanding question that I wanted to ask because of money. You mentioned money. And how much money, when it's, let us say, you're fined at the court, or you are, you have to pay fines for corruption or whatever. I'm just wondering, where does that money go? Does it go to you guys, or
it goes to the consolidated
fund.
Okay, so that was really quick.
It goes to the government. We do not keep those funds.
And so the very, very last one: journalists accessing information about judges regarding their stock holdings, right? I want to know if there are conflicts of interest concerns that judges have just like the rest of us, right? And so let us say, for an instance, this is something I learned in June last year at the conference. It's a situation where would you be open to producing, let us say, for instance, a conflict of interest database, let us say, of judges who might own shares in various companies, so that we know that when you're covering this situation, we can do a cross-check and assess that situation to see if there's a conflict.
My simple answer to you is this: no. Judges are entitled to having a private life and having their private affairs and doing what is necessary to set their private affairs in order for their personal lives, and they already declare. They file their statutory declarations as well to comply with the Integrity Commission Act. So the simple answer to that is no.
And separate and apart from that, I couldn't give you that answer because it has to be discussed with my colleagues. I may be the Chief Justice, but I couldn't sit down here, right here and now, and declare a policy for 143 judges without hearing from them. They may have concerns. They may agree with you, but they may say, okay, I agree with you, but this ought to be done, but I couldn't just sit here and say, yes, I can't do that. As I said, I can't give you the satisfaction that you need in that regard. I can't speak in that regard for these matters for my colleagues.
All right, Chief Justice, thank you. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, all that is left for me to say is thank you for coming this morning and thank you for participating in our conversation with the judiciary. Just before you go, we just want to encourage you to follow us on our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and our WhatsApp channel at Judiciary of Jamaica for Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or X, at Jamaican Judiciary on YouTube, and at Jamaica Judiciary on our WhatsApp channel. And also to indicate to you this morning that the Chief Justice does not have an Instagram page. The Instagram page that is out there purporting to be that of the Chief Justice does not belong to the Chief Justice, does not belong to the Judiciary of Jamaica, is not an authority on anything, any communication material from the Judiciary of Jamaica. Thank you all so much. We thank you for coming. You're an important partner, and we hope to continue the conversations with you. Have a wonderful day.